Good morning, delegates. Apologies for the slight delay there. This is the main stage and my name is Heather Reid. I'd like to warmly welcome you all to the Circular Communities Scotland Annual Conference. We're delighted that you could join us and we hope you find the event interesting, engaging and genuinely useful. Once again, we do find ourselves running a digital conference due to ongoing COVID concerns, and we really hope that you're able to get the most out of this format. In order to do so, please try and treat the event as close as possible to our normal physical conference. Whilst we're always pressured to work on other things and only be partially present, I would encourage you to avoid this temptation and give the event your full focus today. And this will hopefully make it more enjoyable for you and more impactful. We are filming the whole conference too, and any slides used will be made available. Hop-in platform, for those of you who haven't used it before, is designed to mirror a face-to-face event as closely as possible. So let me share some tips on how to get the most out of our conference today. On the platform, on the left-hand side, you'll see various venue areas. Starting with reception at the top of the bar there, here is where you can see links to what's actually happening now. You can find out more about our sponsors and please do check them out because without their support, this event would not have been possible. And you'll also find the conference schedule. Then we move down to the main stage, which is live at the moment. And this is where we'll have all the keynote presentations today. You can only see the main speakers on the screen, but delegates can engage via the chat box on the right-hand side, which has already got some chat in there. And there's a chat box for the whole event as well as for the stage, so make use of that interactiveness. And then you can also see there's a Q&A button as well. So if we move over to the Q&A section, this is where you'll be able to type your questions for our question and answer sessions with the speakers that we have today. And feel free to type your question as the speakers are presenting, because then when we go to the Q&A, I will have kept my eye on things and have a few questions ready. You can also see in that section a polls box as well, and we have now started a poll running, so please interact with that poll. I'll tell you about some more as the day goes on, but this poll is about capturing your thoughts on a circular future, especially given the context of the past couple of years. Back on the left of the stage now, this is where we move down to a sessions area where you'll be able to attend 2 breakout sessions directly after lunch. These are aimed at enabling more engagement and collaboration. We won't be filming these, and you will be able to engage with the host and other participants via the breakout chat box. And if you're invited by the host, you'll be able to share your screen and your sound in these sessions as well. So really trying to take advantage of the technology and make it as interactive as possible. And we are running those breakout sessions back to back, which hopefully will enable you to get as much as possible from attending 2 of these excellent varied sessions that we have on offer today. And then below the sessions button, we have a networking area, which you may have been using already. As you know, it's a vital part of any conference. And there is plenty of designated time within the programme for this during our breaks. And this function allows you to link up with other attendees here at the conference to discuss the event and also to share the great work that your organisations are doing. You can also send private messages, even start video calls with people you know by finding them in the people list on the right-hand side. And then there is our Expo, and we're delighted to have a vibrant Expo with 13 booths on offer. So please take time out to visit those booths. They are interactive with videos and presentations, and most of them provide the opportunity to chat to the booth holders, either via instant messaging or even live face-to-face. So just to quickly run through those organisations for you, if you haven't had a chance to get into the Expo, we have Better World Books, Circular Communities Scotland, Cycling Scotland, Just Enterprise, Keegan and Pennykid, Kudos Software, Redeem Exchange, Armas, Social Print and Copy, Scotland's Climate Festival, Thriftify, and Zero Waste Scotland. Now, inevitably, we are at the mercy of technology and our broadband, and there may be some technical glitches during the day. So if you need any technical help at all, please visit the Cameron Live booth in the Expo area, and there'll be some technicians available to assist you. And if you have any questions at all about the conference, then go to the Circular Communities stand as well. It will be staffed throughout the day, and in particular during breaks. Any questions, that's where you can find out any information. Finally, from me, I'd like to thank our headline conference sponsor today, that's Zero Waste Scotland, along with all of our sponsor organisations, Keegan and Pennykid, Armas, Thriftify, Kudos Software, Just Enterprise, ARAPIC, Better World Books, Social Enterprise Academy and Social Enterprise Scotland for their funding and ongoing support of this digital conference. And now, to officially welcome everyone to our conference this year, it's my pleasure to introduce on the main stage the Chief Executive Officer of Circular Communities Scotland. I'm going to hand over to Michael Cook.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you also for all your role in keeping us on track today. Really appreciate the opportunity to work with you again. I want to add my welcome today. It's great to see you all logging on and talking in the chat. And whilst we would love this to have been face-to-face, I'm grateful that we can do the conference anyway, all from our own home and obviously, or office in our case, and grateful that we are having no climate miles today. Thank you. Let me add up my thanks to all our sponsors for making today possible. Literally, we wouldn't be able to do it without them. So we're very grateful to all the sponsors that Heather just mentioned. We've got a fantastic program today, some great speakers and a really interesting mix and lineup. And I really hope you engage as close to possible as if this was a real event, as Heather said. This is a significant day for us because it's our first conference as Circular Communities Scotland. At one level, that's just a name, but at another level, it's a real statement of intention. And so we're really pleased to have the banners behind me and our new name and brand centre stage as it is for this event. And thank you for your support during the transition that we've just had. It's the same role to support and represent the sector, to support and represent our members, but we believe a clearer identity that clearly ties our brand and our character to two concepts. The first, the circular economy. The old linear economy isn't working. It's not working for people. It's not working for planet. And so we need to transition to a circular economy. And the second concept is communities at the heart of that. And so many of you here today from island communities, from urban communities, from north, south, east, west, and great to see you all. We believe that change has to happen bottom up, not just top down. And it needs to start with people, and people live in communities. So that's hence the name. We actually received a really warm message last night from Avian Williams from Circular Economy Wales, just to congratulate us on the programme and on the rebrand and on the new name. And interestingly, they're following our lead and changing their name next month to Circular Communities Cymru. So that was a really nice message from them, which I wanted to pass on to you. Another interesting development in recent times has been the announcement of a sharing and repair, sharing library and repair cafe network, and I'll be sharing a bit more on that later in my keynote. But a significant development, some investment into our sector that we're really pleased to see, and we worked on a partnership with Edinburgh Remakery and the Tool Library, and indeed we will be working closely with other tool libraries and sharing cafes across Scotland with ambitious plans to grow. So just a few things in the context of today. Significant context, obviously, as we just finished COP26. I see the early poll results there having an element of sharing my own disappointment with COP26. But whatever we think of that event that we hosted here in Glasgow, it's really important that we see COP26 not as the finishing line, but really the starting gun for really making the transitions we need to here in Scotland. And if nothing else, COP26 has shone a really strong spotlight onto Scotland and onto the issue of climate emergency, and it's an opportunity for us to take that forward. So without further ado, I'm looking forward to sharing with you a bit later in the morning, but I'm going to hand back to Heather to make our next introduction, but I will make a sort of pre-introduction, if I may, which is I'm really excited that Scotland has a minister with circular economy in their title. I think that's a first for us here in Scotland and one of the firsts around the world. I think that really just emphasises that circular economy as a concept is coming of age, and it is really at the centre of the policy discussions and debate. So I was privileged to meet Ms. Slater a couple of days ago and share with her ideas for how we could deliver a more circular economy in Scotland. And I'm really looking forward to what she's got to say later. But I'll hand back to Heather before that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael, for that official welcome. And I think by the end of today, the new name, Circular Communities Scotland, will be well and truly embedded in everybody's thinking. And now, as Michael said, it's time for our first keynote, which does take the form of a ministerial address, followed by our question and answer session. So please post questions during and after this talk in the Q&A section on the website. And we are delighted to welcome someone who started off as an engineer and then a manager in the renewables sector. She became co-leader of the Scottish Green Party in August 2019 and then an MSP in May of this year before being appointed as Minister for Green Skills, Circular Economy and Biodiversity. So I'm delighted to welcome onto the main stage Lorna Slater, MSP. Over to the Minister.
Thank you, Well, for getting my full title. I mean, it's going to be ministerial. I don't want this to be formal. We are all friends here working toward the same things. I do apologize. I've had some IT challenges this morning, and so I am on a data connection. So if I freeze up or lock up, that's why. I am really looking forward, in particular, to the Q&A because I want to hear from you, hear your ideas and things in this space. But I'll do the formal bit first. Thank you for the invitation to speak today and to open the first conference, new name of Circular Communities. I thank Circular Communities Scotland for the opportunity to provide a quote for their impact report. I think circular communities have really seized the opportunities of building back fairer, greener society as we recover from COVID. And I am really proud to be the first Minister for Circular Economy in Scotland and indeed anywhere in the British Isles. The Scottish Government and the Scottish Green Party share an ambition to advance Scotland's circular economy as an essential contribution to tackling the twin crises of climate change and biodiversity loss. But I know I'm among friends, and I don't need to pitch to you the importance of and benefits of a circular economy. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to move straight into what we're doing and what I hope we can do in the future, with the idea of moving this discussion along. We talk a lot about, and in government, we talk a lot about waste and waste management. And there is some really good stuff happening in this area. We've got the new recycling fund, £70 million going out to local authorities to help them upgrade their recycling facilities. That's the first significant in recycling that kind of scale for decades. There's the deposit return scheme, which we're very excited about in terms of making a cent in litter, making sure that waste is valuable, that recycled material is valuable and can get and more of it gets recycled. And there's things like the extended producer responsibility coming down the line. So that's a UK-wide initiative which will put the costs of handling packaging waste back on the producers. And so that's all well and good. But as we all know, circular economy is about so much more than waste handling. And I'm hoping, and I know what we'll discuss today is about moving the problem, if you like, or moving the opportunities of the circular economy back up that food chain, moving it into reuse. And particularly as an engineer, what I'm interested in is a redesign. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff going on in the reuse space, and some of it I think we don't even necessarily, outside of ourselves who are sort of the circular economy nerds, recognize as circular economy. Things like anytime you take anything to be repaired, that's the circular economy. Every charity shop on your street, That's the circular economy. That's reuse. And so recognizing that we already have these things, we already have mechanisms for reusing, we already have mechanisms for repairing, but let's make them more glamorous. Let's help them scale up. Let's make it normal to buy your clothes at a charity shop. Let's make it completely easy to go and get things repaired. Let's be proud of our repair skills. I was sitting at my desk the other day and I reached into my bottom drawer and I realized, of course, I've got a sewing kit in my desk drawer. And I was thinking to myself, well, that's a circular economy kit. We should all have sewing kits in our desk drawers and know how to use them in the same way that we all need access to tools so that we can repair our houses and our gardens and our equipment, things like the toolery, making that accessible for everyone. So I'm thinking about circular economy toolkits. What does that look like? I inadvertently caused a row on Twitter the other week by mentioning that I carry cutlery in my backpack because I think that that's part of the circular economy. I like to use plastic cutlery. Obviously, I don't like to use cutlery, even if it's not plastic, because it's nice and proper as using a spoon to eat your food. So I think that there's a lot of interesting discussion to be had here. We already have the circular economy where it's already working, and helping people to recognize that by participating in that, by using a charity shop, either donating stuff from it or buying things from it, by learning to repair, you are participating in something that changes how our economy works, that reduces waste, and that tackles climate crisis. One thing that I'm very much hoping that the extended producer responsibility scheme will do, and what I'm very much pushing for it to do, is to change how we design things. I've told this anecdote a few times now, but I'm sure you can see that last week or the week before, actually, I bought a CO2 monitor for my flat. That's the new law coming in February that everyone in Scotland needs CO2 monitors. So that's what I wanted. I wanted a CO2 monitor. I ordered it. It arrived. It arrived wrapped in a layer of plastic, wrapped in a layer of paper, and then wrapped in a layer of cardboard, and then inside a padded envelope. I was like, I didn't want all that stuff. What I wanted was the CO2 monitor, and yet I had to pay for, and somebody had to design, and somebody had to assemble, and somebody had to design the logos and labeling for all that other stuff, which came to my house and went straight in the recycling bin. What a waste. And what an expense that nobody had to pay for. It didn't benefit me, the customer. It didn't benefit the supplier. It didn't benefit anybody. So there's an element of redesigning this, and we have to make sure we keep that conversation that way. So when we introduce things like the extended producer responsibility, there, may be some concern that this is going to cost us. It isn't intended to cost industries, suffer. We want polluters to pay the price, but if you can redesign your packaging to use less material, ideally, but if you have to, if you're packaging, make sure it's a recyclable material, make sure it itself comes from a sustainable source, make sure that it's good quality material that can easily, that still has value, so that when we get it into the recycling chain, it has value, and therefore we, promote the recycling of that material. If designers of products and packaging have this in from the beginning, then they won't suffer any negative effects from the scheme, if you like. And that's the behavior that's the conversation I want to make we have. That's the conversation I want us to have. It isn't just about going, oh, we're punishing you for creating glitter. It is about, we're trying to incentivize you to design your products differently. So we're already talking about that in the packaging space, in the waste space. I don't think we're having that conversation yet in the repair space about how to incentivize the product designers to make things repairable. So I'm really interested in what's coming down the line on that. I think I understand that in France, for example, there are labeling standards for repairability. That's an interesting, trying to incentivize product designers and manufacturers to make things repairable. 3D printing offers us some really interesting opportunities in repairability, because it means that in order to repair things, you can have sort of repair cafes, all over the country, accessible to everybody, but they don't have to keep enormous stocks of every bit of plastic that belongs to every vacuum cleaner and every toaster, because they can then 3D print the part that you need to get your item working again, and then off you go. You've managed to repair it. So there's some interesting business opportunities here as well in that repair space, and that's the space that I absolutely want to get us into, this very transformative space. Some other ideas that are coming around that I think are interesting. Some of them are old ideas. When I was a kid, if we wanted a fizzy drink, we would take don't tell my mother we did this. We would take a 1 liter sports bottle down to the local 7-Eleven and we would fill that up with whatever sugary concoction came out of a sort of soda fountain thing, out of a machine. We didn't buy bottles of it. We filled up these sports bottles. I'm sure it didn't do my teeth any good, and my mother would be horrified to know that I did that. But that is what we did as teenagers. And so this idea, someone said to me in a meeting this week, but if you want to drink Iron Brew, how do you do that without the can? It's like, we used to do that. If I want to drink Iron Brew, I don't want a plastic bottle necessarily. So going back to some of these things that used to work perfectly well, the soda fountain model, for example, refilling models. We can all remember a time, well, maybe we can't all remember a time. We can certainly, you imagine a time in the past where everything in the supermarket didn't come in plastic, little plastic punnets that got thrown away, that those could come back and be refilled. So the refilling model, I think, is a really interesting one, making that more mainstream. Some of that may require some advances. I am, as an engineer, again, really interested in the possibility of standard packaging. I mean, what if every bottle of shampoo on the shelf was in the same standard package? Then you return that bottle, it gets refilled, and it reappears. So the branding and so forth is done through labeling, for example. And then what if every bottle was the same to encourage refilling, to encourage standardization of transport? You could do all sorts of wonderful things if you start looking across the piece and seeing what kind of standard packaging is available. You could ensure good quality of material. You could ensure reuse of material. And I think there's some really interesting ideas there. The final thing that I want to talk about is an element of making it cool. So we talk about individuals having a choice in this, and we all know that what we're fighting against is the capitalist consumer culture where it's like buy more, buy more, buy more. But I think that there is a shift in the value structure, and I want to help support that towards living a life of meaningful experience, of meaningful connection, of valuing those aspects of our life rather than this sort of notorious working 80 hours, buy a bunch of stuff you don't need to impress people you don't even like. I measure quality of life by the amount of stuff we own. Of course, we all agree that there is a minimum level of, obviously living in poverty is not the idea here, but there's a sort of minimum level of physical comfort that we need, of convenience that we need. But beyond that, the things that are meaningful in life are connection to your family, connection to your communities, having opportunities to spend time doing things that you love with people that you care about. And all of that conversation I want to have around a circular economy, around why we choose to do the things we choose. And that brings me back to having the cutlery in my backpack, because food tastes better when you eat it off of real cutlery. Tea tastes better when you drink it out of a real mug, not out of a paper or plastic one. So I think there's a sort of narrative here around quality of life. And that when we make things out of good materials and we make them to last and reuse, they have value, and that we value the way it helps us experience a good cup of tea or a lovely cup of coffee. And I think that can even be extended. I know it's quite trendy. There's some good TikTok trends on with people who don't like to use plastic throwaway culture, that they prefer to write letters by hand on paper, that they prefer to read real books that they can hold in their hands. So I think that there is a narrative here, not one of sacrifice, but of one of improving quality of life, of having objects in our lives that help us to connect with each other and the world, and that everything in the world doesn't have to be made of plastic or virtual on a screen or made to throw away. So that's the conversation that I want to have, but how we make it cool, how we make it valuable to enjoy these things that have been designed beautifully, that have been designed to last, and how we become proud of our repair skills. So I'll stop talking there because I'm so interested in going over to the Q&A and hearing from you.
Thank you very much indeed for your presentation there. And I think certainly what you've been talking about really connects with a lot of our agenda on our conference today. So that works well, and it's already stimulated some questions in our boxes here as well. So I'm going to kick off with one around waste that you were talking about there, and from Mark. Stella's Voice, he's asking and saying that councils have waste departments and waste teams. Obviously, some councils do better on this than other councils. So why does the government not work with councils to introduce reuse teams and make that more of a priority and first task rather than waste?
I mean, it's a very sensible ask. Some councils do have reuse teams. I mean, on the whole, with the principle of subsidiarity, we want councils to be able to have local powers and make the right decisions for themselves. We don't really like a top-down model where it's always, the government in Holyrood sort of imposing things on councils. But there is an element of supporting councils to do that, and that's something I think we would all be interested in looking at going forward, supporting councils to all have a reuse department. So it's something I'm very interested in and we'll be looking at, certainly.
That's good to hear, and also a question here around the deposit return scheme, which you mentioned, and someone asking about your understanding of the disappointment around the delays in the bottle and cans deposit and return scheme, and how do you think it's going to play out, I suppose, over the next few months in particular?
This is absolutely a live issue, as you know, trying to figure out how to get this scheme, which is one of the more ambitious versions of the scheme that exists in the world, implemented as quickly as we possibly can. I completely sympathize with the disappointment and frustration around here. It's something that we are working on actively right now. Any detailed announcement has to go to Parliament first before I can speak in public about that. That's the rule, so that Parliament can scrutinise that before a public announcement is made. But please be assured that this is underway. We're working to do this as quickly as possible. There are some challenges in this sector, as I'm sure you're all aware, with the COVID pandemic. The legislation for the deposit return scheme was brought in 2020. In 2021, so this year, Circularity Scotland was created. Circularity Scotland is an industry body which is tasked with implementation of the scheme. So they were in place by April this year and have been working very hard with industry partners around Scotland to get this scheme off the ground. So that's the state of play where we've got to, and it's a question of how quickly we can do it. I'm sure you understand that the very businesses that need to implement this scheme, the local convenience stores, the bars and restaurants, bars in particular, hospitality venues, small brewers, these are the exact industries that have been affected so badly by COVID, and because of the restrictions in the hospitality sector in particular, but also because of labor problems due to Brexit. And so we've got to make sure that when we implement this scheme, these businesses are able to do so. It would be, I can't implement a scheme that leaves them out. There would be something like 35,000 return points around Scotland, and that means that we have to support all those businesses to be able to do that. So please rest assured, I am absolutely committed to getting the scheme in as soon as practicably possible and supporting all these various businesses to do so successfully. Because to my mind, the really important thing is that the scheme works. We need people to have confidence with the scheme. We need people to be able to have a good experience with the scheme, because we'll be living with this scheme for decades and decades and decades. And if we don't get it right, if people have a bad experience with this scheme, if businesses are unable to comply with the scheme, that would be a failed implementation. So the most important thing is to get it right, and I assure you I'm doing that as quickly as I can.
Thank you for that. I did think it was going to come up because obviously it's something our delegates are
it's really important.
Very, as you are as well. So thank you for that response. Another question that's coming through with quite a few likes is what are your thoughts on a statutory reuse target for local authorities? I mean, I know you've said about you don't like the top-down approach, but given the importance of this and the contribution it can make to emissions, to our circular economy, is it time for statutory reuse targets for local authorities?
It's absolutely something that we're considering. So I'm excited that people are supportive of that, because I think, it's absolutely something that we're considering. It's the kind of thing that we'll be looking at in the circular economy bill that will be brought, because I think we do need to move beyond the recycling chat. Recycling is very 80s. We were talking about recycling when I was a kid, and we need to move to reuse. So absolutely something.
Great. So that was a sort of follow-up one there on with local authorities. Another question from Pauline Robinson around how we promote the sharing economy as part of a circular economy. Tool libraries are becoming more common, but we could have many more libraries of things, as Pauline's calling it. What are your thoughts on that, and any plans within government?
So there was an announcement last week. Michael Matheson announced funding support for sharing libraries and for more repair cafes. So that is something we're actively already supporting. I mean, I think at this point, the limit of your creativity is the limit. So we have a wonderful tool library where I live in Leith. And I mean, what else can we do? I'm really interested in this. I mean, I'm interested in stuff around, I'm interested in dresses and fashion things. So things around clothing. Why do we, this idea that you wear something once, especially if it's for a large event and then don't wear it again? Are there ways of doing gown hires for that kind of thing, like we do for formal events, for graduations and so on? But yeah, I'm really interested in your creative solutions. I would very much like to, in my role, come around Scotland and meet people who are doing really interesting things in this area and help promote and support what they're doing. I mean, we all know about, libraries exist for books. Tool libraries are starting to exist. What else is out there? So yeah, hit me with your ideas.
Well, here I suppose is another idea around strategies for taking social enterprise into schools. So I think everybody has been hugely impressed with youth activism around climate change, around COP. But can we embed the values of the circular economy into the national curriculum? Because I think you touched on one there about being able to reuse and hire clothes. And I suppose younger people are very passionate about climate change, but possibly are still buying a sort of one season fashion. So how do we embed those messages? And is it about embedding the values of the circular economy actually into the national curriculum?
So I mean, I'm really uncomfortable with the narrative that climate change and our problems that we have are the problem of young people. Young people didn't cause these problems, and I don't think it should be up to young people to solve them. I'm not happy with the narrative that it's young people buying fast fashion that are the problem. Often the conversation I have is the other way generationally. People who were brought up. I had this conversation with my own parents. My parents live in a big house with a double car garage, and they can't imagine. They measure their experience and their success as people with how big their house is and how many cars they own. That's how they were raised. And the idea that I measure my life by different values, by the quality of my experience, by how close I can live to my work. I live in a flat. My parents are sort of horrified by that, but I live in a flat because it means I can walk to work, because that's what I value. I value my time. And that means that I don't wish to commute. I don't wish to waste time in a commute. So I think that young people already are shifting that narrative. I think the young people are leading the way on this. So while of course it'd be great to get these things in the curriculum, there's kind of two elements to that. One is, as I said, I don't think young people are the problem. I think young people already value experiences and connection with one another in a way that previous generations maybe didn't so much. I think there's a cultural shift there, and we can see that in terms of spending patterns. But we don't have time. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, this is a climate emergency. Great, by all means, teach the kids in school. But for 15 years, and we don't have time. We have less than 10 years to make significant changes to our society. So that means we can't sit around waiting for the kids to fix this. We have to fix it now. Like, the urgency of this cannot be overstated. So while I am delighted that absolutely let's get this stuff into the curriculum, let's not pretend that that's going to fix the problem in time. We need to do this stuff right now.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. And a question also about tax and about funding for the immediate action. And how could tax rebalancing help develop a more circular economy? For example, decreasing tax on employment to stimulate jobs and putting that tax on resources to encourage us to better value resources. So what are your thoughts about the way we administer tax and it sitting within a circular economy?
It's an area that I'm very interested in. I'm a bit of an economics nerd and I find that area fascinating. And then obviously Scotland has extremely limited powers of taxation. And with any sort of taxation, you need to make sure that you're not then adding sort of perverse incentives inadvertently. So I think there is some space for conversation around how we use tax incentives for various things. But I don't have any sort of concrete proposals in front of me just now on that matter. But yeah, it's absolutely a space that we can look at, and I think we are actively looking at in terms of councils and so on, what powers councils may have, and how we can incentivize the right kind of behaviour. It's definitely a complicated area, and there is a sort of carrot and stick element, isn't it? Given limited budgets and so on, there's only so much carrot to go around. So yeah, then do you have to start looking at that? As I say, I think the answer is in terms of waste reduction, incentivizing that behavior to keep waste out of the system. And some of that is supporting mechanisms that already work, like charity shops, making sure we have more tool libraries, more repair cafes, so that waste doesn't get into the system. And even considering, as I said, we are the statutory targets for reuse. That kind of thing means that hopefully we don't have to use punitive measures like taxation, or we can use them very wisely to drive the kind of behavior that we want.
No, absolutely. And in terms of driving that circular economy, there's some questions coming in around when our members and our organisations will be able to start working with you on the circular economy bill to help make it as strong and as ambitious as it possibly can be.
As soon as possible. I mean, if you've got proposals and things you'd like to see in that bill, send them to me at my ministerial address. The circular economy bill is actually sitting on my desktop, something that I'm reading just now and working on. So I am interested in your proposals. Send them to me, and if you email me at my ministerial address, we'll be putting in meetings with stakeholders and things. So yeah, that's something we can start already.
Well, that's fantastic. And you being here and actually taking questions as well from our delegates, what really helps start and move forward that process. So thank you for that. And I think we've got time for one final question, which is around COP26. Obviously, just happened on our doorstep here in Glasgow. What were your main takeaways from COP26, and what do you feel it achieved for Scotland and where you want us to be?
So I had two roles at COP26 because I wear two different hats. I was at COP26 in a formal capacity as a Scottish Government minister, doing largely diplomacy and largely with our EU neighbours, and particularly with Green ministers around the EU, because there are Greens in government in now, as of today, 10 governments around the EU, because the Germans got their coalition agreement approved. So, that was really exciting to be part of that effort. So I think I'm answering your second question first, but in terms of, I think Scotland really put our best foot forward there, and we were able to have sort of one-on-one meetings with other ministers from around Europe, both talking about, obviously, my political position on Scotland becoming an independent country and rejoining Europe, but also on sharing things around things like biodiversity, around how other countries handle circular economy. So there was a really practical knowledge sharing there, which was very exciting. So in that element, that sort of diplomacy and connection element, I thought was super powerful. Scotland really put a good foot forward, and we made some very good connections there that I look forward to working with. The overall outcome of COP, as we all really disappointing. A COP as written doesn't keep the world to 1.5 degrees, but I don't think that means that we stop. Scotland was leading on this, something which we call the Edinburgh process, which was about how non-state actors can carry some of the missions of COP forward. We don't have to wait for Joe Biden and Boris Johnson and the other big countries to come to some sort of agreement on this. We can still move forward, and our mission hasn't changed. The science hasn't changed, the deadlines haven't changed, but we can move forward with really ambitious plans. And that's what we're doing. With Greens in government in Scotland, we have the ability to do this. And being the Minister for Circular Economy means that I'm in place to make these decisions and push them forward as quickly as possible. So we don't have to wait. We can continue to be really ambitious.
Well, I think that's music to the ears of our delegates, and I know they will want to be able to stay in touch with yourself through our organisation. And we really appreciate you being here today for your presentation, for taking the question and answer session as well. So apologies to those who I didn't quite get to your question, but we will tabulate them all, and we'll look at ways we can get some responses in our sort of feedback about the event. But in the meantime, thank you so much for being with us, for bearing with us with the technology as well, and for taking the questions. Thank you very much to the Minister, Lorna Slater, MSP. Thank you. Thank you indeed. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, our next session. And our next speaker is Dr. Catherine Trebek, who is co-founder of the Wellbeing Economy Alliance. Catherine is a writer, a researcher, and an advocate for economic system change. She developed Oxfam's Humankind Index and led their work in downscaling the donut for various countries. She is part of a wide range of advisory groups across the UK and beyond, as well as being a senior research fellow at the University of Strathclyde. We are delighted to welcome her onto the main stage, and this morning she's going to be talking to us about creating virtuous cycles. So I'll hand over to Dr. Catherine Trebek.
Thank you so much, Heather, and good morning, everyone. Really great to be here. It was just fantastic to be able to listen to Lorna. She's really getting into her stride as a minister. It's wonderful to see. So I want to reflect on how the extent to which the interlocking crises that you've already discussed this morning, whether that's the environmental breakdown or the various dimensions of inequality, horizontal and vertical inequalities, communities and individuals feeling they have no hope, all of those interlocking crises demand of us to think about interwoven solutions in response, because it's not good enough for us anymore to see the environmental crisis on the one hand and the social justice crises on the other as separate, because they are very much two sides of the same coin. Because the climate crisis, the environmental breakdown crisis, is a social justice story. You'll all know that, and you'll know that we see that in the extent of who it is who's being hit hardest by the impacts of the environmental crises, but also who it is who is most responsible. We've seen that in recent evidence that's come out from Oxfam, for example, around the extent to which it is the consumption patterns of those with the highest wealth in whatever country they're in who are literally taking up more ecological room than is their fair share. And that means there is limited ecological space for others, whether as a country or as individuals, to increase their material living standards. So if we're going to grapple with inequalities, we need to grapple with those inequalities in the environmental crisis. And when I say two sides of the same coin, I do that very deliberately, because that metaphor of the coin is really quite apt, because it reminds us that it is the economic system that links the two. Things like how we tax, great question in the previous section, we're happy to come back to that in our Q&A. How we tax things, what we price, do we embed the correct prices in what people see when they look at the price tag of something? Do we take account of that? What sort of business models, the design of our infrastructure in our cities, what sort of subsidies, what sort of encouragement we give to different sorts of businesses. All of those different conversations, those different dynamics of the economy absolutely matter. And the current story with our current economic system, I talk about the three stages of that. So in a way, the first stage is this mantra of grow the economy big. And so often, and too often, that comes with putting blinkers onto the environmental and social damage that comes to that. And then the next stage is do what we can to sequester some of the resources back through the tax system. And you'll all recognize, having just read things like the Paradise Papers scandal released just a few weeks ago, you all know the machinations around increasing taxes, how hard that is to sequester some tax back through growing economy. And then the third stage is use some of that resource to deal with the damage that we created in step one. And we call that failure demand in a social policy term, and ecological economists would call that defensive expenditure. So much of our collective resource goes to spending on patching up, repairing, end of pipeline remedial action that was caused by the damage of our current economic system. So how can our economy change to attend simultaneously to those social and environmental crises? Well, the idea of the well-being economy at its core is that hope that we can design the economic system and dare to ask, can we do better than that patch and repair settlement that's demanded by the current model of economic growth that we've got? We talk about well-being economy at its most basic being about delivering social justice on a healthy planet. We spoke to all our members about what at the very core of their vision for the economy would they like to see, and we brought that down into what we describe as the 5 needs that our economy has to be purposed to deliver. And these are things I think will be quite intuitive to you. Things like participation, dignity, connection, fairness, and of course, regenerating the natural world. Now, as you've just been discussing, there are a plethora of changes that are required to build that sort of economy. I talk about the 4 Ps, and I use often the metaphor of a jigsaw puzzle of changes that we require. But these 4 Ps make up the corners of that jigsaw puzzle. Any of you who have been playing jigsaws during lockdown will know that one of the techniques is you start to cluster the pieces around these 4 Ps. So think about all the different pieces of the jigsaw we need to build a well-being economy. And here are my corners that I offer you. So the 4 Ps are prevention, purpose, pre-distribution, and people-powered. So where does the circular economy come into those 4 Ps? Well, in terms of purpose, at its very essence, the circular economy inherently understands the embedded nature of the system, something that ecological economists have been talking about for ages. And I participated last night in the book launch of the biography of Herman Daly, of course, who's one of the founding fathers of ecological economics. And he really reminded us that we need to stop seeing the economy as a goal in its own right, let alone something that society and the environment are subservient to. We need to think about embedded systems, with the economy embedded within society and the two embedded within nature. And I think the circular economy inherently has that at its very essence, at its very purpose. Talking about the next P of the jigsaw puzzle, corners, prevention. More circular economy, of course, means less need for carbon capture, sequestration and storage, less need for beach cleanup. So we get things right through a circular economy that requires much less damage that we then need to clean up and repair. Thinking about pre-distribution, well, harnessing, as we've heard through things like extended producer responsibility, harnessing production and consumption techniques to create the outcomes we want through the marketplace. So designing market outcomes from the beginning. And finally, the final P, people powered. We need artists, we need designers, we need tradespeople, we need sharers, we need repairers, all crucial to a well-being economy. But also, the well-being economy and the circular economy will not thrive if people themselves are not prepared to change their priorities. So this shift has to have people at its essence. People have to be excited about it. And it was really great to hear the minister talk about the extent to which we need to make this trendy, we need to change the narrative, and we need to really focus on the quality of life benefits from what circular economy operates. And I think that's absolutely right, because we need to help people and encourage people take the time to repair and reuse and purpose their goods. We need to help people take the time to reimagine their business models and collaborate with others who have got the ideas and the skills needed to do manufacturing differently. And in doing so, create the sort of jobs that we need more of in Scotland, jobs that are creative, that bring purpose at their heart, that offer the satisfaction of making something, and jobs that are embedded in communities. So circular economy is inherently part of that wider shift to build a well-being economy. It's an absolutely necessary piece of the jigsaw, but it also provides the proof of the possible. The possibility that it is absolutely doable to treat the ecosystem like our life depends on it, rather than simply as a source of materials and a waste sink. That it is absolutely possible to flourish as a business without dismissing the environmental impact simply as an externality. The circular economy also says it's absolutely possible to create jobs with meaning and purpose and dignity rather than treating human beings as just-in-time inventory, as we so often see with that contingent on-demand gig economy labour market. The circular economy also shows that it is possible to work with the mindset that the wellbeing economy needs, recognising those nested systems and crucially embracing those multiple benefits that we need to see, not just that isolated, siloed thinking that so often has characterised this effort in the past. And I think the good news is that Scotland, yes, it has a long way to go. Yes, there is so much more we can do, but it has a lot to be proud of on the circular economy front. The extent to which we're having this gathering today is proof of that. There is no lack of incredible examples across Scotland, incredible people rolling up their sleeves and delivering the sort of change that we need. The challenge is that until the economy is naturally and inherently and automatically circular, rather than just seeing circular economy as an add-on or a small little section of the economy, until we get there, when our economy is by definition a circular economy, all of us will need to keep collaborating with each other, take lessons from those pioneers who are proving and demonstrating what change looks like, take inspiration from those thought leaders and those practitioners who show us that it's possible, and building that circular economy community of practice that you're building here today and enhancing, but also working with others who are not there yet, who are curious, who are maybe even a bit skeptical. Work with them to bring them into that fold so that they know it's possible. Share the sorts of skills that we needed. But also, as you've already done this morning, make sure that government knows what they need to do to change in the policy regime, in the tax, in the subsidy regime, in the planning, in the procurement regime. Make sure so that that regime, the policy system, is on side of the sort of activities we need, rather than having the incredible work that is already happening in Scotland going against the grain of what's seen as normal and possible. Because by doing that, by working together collectively, but also working to train our gaze on the changes in the policy system we needed, we will get to a circular economy and to a wellbeing economy faster. Thanks so much, Heather.
Thank you very much indeed, Catherine, for that fantastic overview of the importance of a wellbeing economy and the role that a circular economy plays with that, the integral role, and for answering some of the questions that we've already developed on the chat. And you will be back for our Q&A after our next speaker. Thank you very much indeed, Catherine. And so let me introduce our next speaker before we have another Q&A session, when you can be putting your questions into the Q&A box as we're going along. I think we're actually going to take all of the questions there and safely record them, and then we'll start afresh. And so our next speaker is someone who is a brilliant supporter of this conference. It's Jill Farrell, who is Head of Customer Engagement and Communications for Zero Waste Scotland. Jill has over 20 years of experience of developing Scotland's economy, working with companies from multinationals to startups, and also promoting Scotland's capabilities internationally. She is part of Zero Waste Scotland's executive leadership team, of course, our headline corporate sponsor, and we're delighted to welcome her onto the main stage to join us and to talk to us about reimagining a circular Scotland. It's over to Jill Farrell.
Hi Heather, thank you so much for the kind introduction, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here today. I think this is my second time at what was CRNS is now Circular Communities Scotland conference, and it's always been a really stimulating session, so delighted to be back and in such prestigious company. I'd like to share a few slides with you which I think build upon what the Minister and our academic leaders are contributing already. So we've got government. I mean, I keep saying this, I need to prove if it's true or not. I think the Scottish Government has the first circular economy minister in the world. So if that's not a statement about how mainstream the circular economy is in Scotland, I don't know what is. With people like Catherine leading academic thinkers and publishers and inspirers in Scotland. We are, absolutely, we've got academia on side. I represent Zero Waste Scotland. We're a not-for-profit business. We're funded by the Scottish Government, and we're about trying to get Scotland into a place where there's zero waste, enabled by the circular economy, driving positive use of resources, all resources, and accelerating this transition to a circular economy. And we do that by working in partnership, and we do that by putting circular economy principles into practice. We use a lot of evidence that we develop to support and help inform the policy decision making in Scottish Government, to put out information to help inform industry of future challenges that they're likely to face. And equally, industry being entrepreneurial, they often convert that into innovation opportunities, the ways that they can change their business model, change their markets to fit future demand from consumers or future restrictions on resources. Some of the work that we've done recently includes the publishing of the material flow account, and that research looked at all of the materials that are consumed in Scotland, and that's everything, including the materials used to build your car, the carbon consumed to ship your car. And we came up with a very scary figure that per capita in Scotland, we consume about 18 tonnes of materials per person per year. We're keen not to put a target on that in terms of what sustainable look like, because we would like to get lower than any target that would be out there. But really what we're talking about is, for a sustainable future for our planet, we should be looking at getting down to around 8 tonnes per person per annum. So that is a massive shift that's required. And the area that we're really focusing on in terms of stimulating thinking is around consumption reduction, because, as Catherine and the Minister have rehearsed, the circular economy is a system. There's no getting away from the fact that what we do in the global north has huge impacts, typically from a manufacturing perspective, in the global south. And I was really struck at COP26, one of our former colleagues, Jack Barry, who now works for Chatham House, was talking about our ambition around net zero. And if we're to achieve net zero in the global north, 70% of the infrastructure required has not been built yet. So that infrastructure will pull on natural resources from around the world. So for example, if you're thinking, I need to get rid of this petrol diesel car and move to electric, that's great from a net zero perspective. From a demand perspective, we're going to have to provide way more charging points. There was something on about Radio 4 yesterday that we need way more charging points for electric vehicles to make it nice and convenient for all of us to use our electric cars. That demand for net zero infrastructure has, for example, a 4,000% increase in demand for lithium internationally. Lithium mining is an absolutely filthy industry. The byproduct from lithium mining is utterly toxic, and the living and working conditions of people who go down lithium mines are pretty horrendous. So thinking through what some of those unintended consequences are of going for net zero, rather than saying, I'm going to move from a petrol car to an electric car, what I should be thinking is, okay, what's my alternative to using a car? I've got active travel, I've got public transport, and if I actually need a car, there are so many car leasing schemes now where, if I'm helping my brother move, I can lease a different kind of vehicle than if I need to take my mum to the GP appointment and she can't get there by bus. So allowing us all to think differently is really important. But as we've rehearsed earlier, this is about a system. Government can't affect these changes in isolation. Businesses can't. academia and organisations like Zero Waste Scotland can help to inform the discussion with statistics and information, but it requires different thinking about the ways that we live and work. And I think the really good news from a Zero Waste Scotland perspective is that we are seeing lots of changes happening already. We are working across Scotland with different businesses, with local government, with national government, obviously, with academics, with the different agencies in Scotland to help explore how can we make this massive shift in terms of our carbon footprint, but also the way that we live and experience life in Scotland. So one of the things that we're looking at with colleagues across Scotland is some work that Architecture Design Scotland did, which is looking at Scotland in 2050. It's a report called Designing for a Changing Climate, Carbon Conscious Places. And it's I really commend that you have a look at it if you're interested. It's about how communities can work differently, how communities can evolve differently to embrace a circular and a just economy, to bring life back into our cities and town centres, and builds on principles like the 20-minute city. So a proposal that wherever you live, you should be able to access all your needs from a work perspective, an education perspective, leisure perspective, within a 20-minute active travel radius. So that means a lot more local restaurants, a lot more local shops, repair shops, for example, rather than your big multinational stores, which are only sustainable if they've got hundreds of thousands of people footfall on a daily basis. Just a different way of thinking about what success looks like in an economy, a society, and a community. And we're working through this with partners across Scotland. We're taking a very place-based approach to rolling out the circular economy. And as you see here, we're working with all of the main cities in Scotland, as well as the Highlands and Islands and the south of Scotland, because obviously the rural dynamics are different and may require different interventions, different forms of support. Through all of this work, we're working with the Chambers of Commerce in the relevant cities, but also engaging the local authorities, engaging businesses in these geographies through the Chambers of Commerce and through other existing economic infrastructure. So things like the Glasgow Economic Leadership Board, where you've got university and local authority co-chairing a group of business leaders who are looking at the economic priorities for that region. So having the conversation with them about how the circular economy is part of that solution and not, as was suggested earlier, some kind of nice to do add-on. Similarly, having conversations with businesses who are genuinely looking at the ways in which they can improve their environmental, their social, and their governance responsibilities. So it's reporting called ESG reporting, which holds companies to account in terms of their environmental, their social, and their governance performance. And there's been research done internationally that's suggesting that investors from around the world are looking at two top priorities when they're considering investment. The first is cybersecurity of a business that they may invest in. The second is their environmental performance. So it's not just a nice to do for businesses. Their customers are demanding it. Investors are requiring it. And if businesses don't start to change their operating models so that they're constantly thinking about how they minimize their demand for resources, how they maximize the use of all materials in their business, then they won't have a business for very long. And many, many companies in Scotland, we've been working with hundreds of SMEs to help them look at their business models. We're now starting to engage with some of the non-SMEs, so the more than 250 employees, the larger businesses in Scotland, who have a bigger reach because they've got big supply chains, and they can start to inform their supply chain and put demands on their supply chain that if you want to supply to us, here are some of the criteria that we need you to subscribe to, and including circular economy principles in that. So we're not here to spoil everybody's fun. As the Minister said, it would be nice if the circular economy was considered sexy. So one of the ways that we've been working with consumers across Scotland, and I hope some of you will have experienced a Revolve accredited store in the past. The textiles industry is one of the biggest polluting industries in the world, both in terms of how things are manufactured and the massive waste that's associated with it. Recent statistics from Greenpeace say that I think there's been a 100% increase in consumption of fashion items over the last 10 years. So that's completely unsustainable. Through the Revolve network, what we've been doing for the past 7 or 8 years is working with stores that sell pre-owned, pre-loved clothes, furniture, and helping them to curate their stores so that shopping in a store that's selling pre-loved items feels like shopping in any boutique, any small store that you would normally go into. And this has been a massively successful product approach. We've been working with a number of charity chains as well to help them. And it's seeing an increase in footfall. It's a very interesting statistic, actually, when we're talking about the impact of Revolve. I was saying, can we not just measure footfall? Can we not survey about footfall? And one of my colleagues, in fact, Sam, who's front and centre in this photo, told me that there was a big challenge with surveying people about who bought second pre-loved, pre-owned products, because people with a high disposable income will exaggerate the amount of pre-owned items that they buy because they know themselves it's the right thing to do, but probably don't do it very much. People with lower disposable incomes tend to underestimate what pre-owned items they own or they buy, because they see that as a negative in terms of they're only buying pre-owned because they can't afford to buy new. So Revolve needs to be part of that making circular economy sexy conversation. How do we make it trendy? How do we make people proud to have pre-owned, pre-loved items in their lives? How do we make people proud of saying, I'm buying half as much clothes, half as many clothes, I'm not replacing my kitchen every 5 years, which I believe is a thing somewhere for some people. I am actually making positive decisions to decrease what I consume. And we're in the run up to Christmas. Great opportunity to give people experiences as a gift rather than things. Give people time, give people access to things they might not necessarily have access to, but try not to buy so much stuff when we know in our hearts that the people we love don't need the stuff. They probably just want to spend more time with us or have a different experience with us or their other friends. So I think the great news is there's lots of terrific stuff happening. As Catherine said earlier, having a circular economy minister, as I say, I think is a massive statement from Scotland about how important this is. And we've got the academics, we've got the public sector, and we've got Circular Communities Scotland now. So I'm very optimistic about the direction of travel in Scotland. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Jill, for that overview of what Zero Waste Scotland is doing and an approach to our circular economy, some of the challenges and opportunities, but also some of the mechanisms for our delegates to engage with you and move forward on this. And we are now moving on to our Q&A with Jill, and also welcoming back Catherine as well. There we are. Excellent. The technology is working and the questions have been coming through on the chat. We are just using the one chat for the whole event, I've been told. So I'm keeping an eye on it. And I think a question that came through during Catherine's chat, but Jill may have some thoughts on this as well, just some advice on what are the key structures that need to change to remove that growth dependence from our current mainstream economy that you were talking about. In particular, the example that Philip gives is around how banks create money as debt. So what do you think are the key structures, these first steps to make the change possible?
Thanks, Heather, and thanks, Philip. I mean, it is sadly not a simple, here's top 10 solutions I can give you. This really is grappling with the complexity and mindsets that lock in the current system, boring on things such as path dependencies on the way things are done, how we look at different policies. So it's almost tools of the trade and heuristics that civil servants use. I like to get my head around this multifaceted system, thinking about, inspired by Frank Gill's, great systems thinking around the idea of 3 different levels of the system. So the macro, the mesi, and the micro. And the macro, of course, is the purpose of the economy. And that's why I so often bang on about GDP. If we're keeping on holding on to GDP as a sign or an indicator of our national success, all the sorts of policies underneath it at the mese level will still be aligned to GDP. And those that aren't will be hard fought for and almost the exception that proves the rule. And until those policies are aligned at the micro level, the policies and practices that we've been talking about and seeing photos of today through Jill's amazing talk, all of those will still be the exception that proves the rule. And so we need to pay attention at all levels of the system. What's the very purpose of the economy? How do we do our policy regime? And how do we support and encourage and incubate those sorts of pioneers that are already doing the work at the micro level? So for me, we do need to keep paying attention to questions like, have we got our measures of progress right? Or is all this work still going against the grain? Philip's point around banks and money is a really interesting one. It's an area I don't feel that I have loads of expertise in, and one of many areas, and I tend to refer folks to our colleagues such as those at Positive Money. I will say there is research being done that's questioning the question of debt in terms of how it locks in growth. So look at the work of Beth Stratford for that, because it's a fast-moving debate. But I think we do need to think about how the whole financial system operates. I mean, it should be the plumbing or the energy giving system for the sort of economic activities we need in a wellbeing economy. We need financial institutions that direct finance to the sort of activities that we need. And there's a beautiful phrase that Tim Jackson, who a lot of you will know his work, where he talks about we need to see investment not as a source of rent seeking to make those of us who have got money wealthier, but we should see it as commitment. What sort of commitment are we putting to the sort of activities we need more of? But there's a lot of work happening in the finance system, I think, that's heartening, and others on this call will probably know a lot that's going on there. We can come back to talk about that later in a minute.
No, thank you very much for that. And actually, a question that really has come through in quite a few of the additions that we have here is around behavioural change, and Jill talked about that. You've mentioned it as well, Catherine. So Jill, if I can come to you first, how do we shift public opinion in terms of circular and well-being economy, so that reuse and repair and sharing are the mainstream rather than add-ons? What do you see as the most important steps? And I think you touched in your presentation on some of that. So behavioural change, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the bottom line is the vast majority of people want to do the right thing. It's just a matter of understanding what is the right thing. And, the whole net zero conversation is really interesting because, yeah, absolutely, net zero is a fabulous goal to aim for. But if you do it at the exclusion of all of those wider social and international impacts, it's going to have horrible unintended consequences. So, members of the public's head will be reeling because they're thinking, well, wait a minute, I'm getting my electric car, I'm doing the right thing. What are you telling me now? It's, causing horrible environmental and social injustice in other parts of the world. How do I win? So there's something definitely around communication to help people understand how they as individuals can change the way that they use resources, that they manage resources. I mean, I'm in the leafy West End of Glasgow, which is very nice, high net worth area. I can see my recycling bins for the block out the back, and they're a nightmare. People are putting all the wrong things in the blue bins. They're piling up the stuff outside the blue bins because the blue bins aren't emptied yet. No disrespect to Glasgow City Council. This is people trying to do the right thing at a very basic level with recycling, but they don't have the information, or they haven't assimilated the information, or back to this convenience thing. One of my neighbours has decided, I've made the journey to the blue bins and they're full, but stuff it, I'll just leave this material outside. It's going to be raining and very windy tonight, so that's going to be all over probably be in your back garden by tomorrow morning, Heather. People want to do the right things, but they need the infrastructure, they need the information, and it's got to be the right information at a time when the infrastructure is available for them to be able to do easily. Because if you make things difficult for people, they will just revert to what's easy. And that whole conversation about our individual convenience in the global north and the impact on the environment at COP26, is chatting to a guy from one of the big fizzy drinks companies. Really interesting Swedish guy working in New York, innovating for this soft drinks company, who's been told by their big customers, the big universities with campuses, big banks with campuses, we don't want your plastic. We want your fizzy drinks, but we don't want your plastics. So they're looking at vending machines where you can get your fizzy drink with whatever sugar, whatever cherry, or whatever else you want in it, and you use your reusable cup. So the designers, the innovators in his New York lab are still going to the fridge and grabbing a can because that's easier for them. That's more simple. Now, a simple thing to do in that situation, just take away the cans. Don't give them the option of having a chilled can. So that kind of nudge to people to say, well, okay, you've got two options here. You're continually choosing the most convenient for you, but the worst possible scenario for the planet. Take away some of those options. And that's hard for companies to do, for people to do. But I genuinely think people want to do the right thing, but they need the infrastructure in place to make it really straightforward and easy for them.
Absolutely. And I think there's an opportunity at the moment because of the awareness around COP and the engagement with the media as well. So now really is the time, isn't it? Catherine,
can I add two points to Jill's? I mean, so we're building up between us a nice little toolbox of things. We've got infrastructure design, make it easier for people, nudging, choice editing, harness the innovators like the chap you were talking about. None of that's easy on its own, but that's all vitally important. But I was really struck, Jill, by one of the figures or the references you were talking about at the end around the paradox of people's reporting the extent to which they use pre-owned clothing, and that imbalance between, if you're on a high income, you want to say you do more, and folks on a low income feeling that sense of shame by admitting to high use of pre-owned clothing, pre-loved goods in their houses. And I think that's something that behoves all of us as a society to attend to. It means that we have got a much bigger job ahead of us. The extent to which, one, low income exists in the first place, but in the short term, the experience of that, we've got such consumer orientated, appearance orientated societies, image orientated societies, that people feel shame to the point that they're not able to celebrate that they're using pre-owned clothing. And so I think we need to be working with sociologists, with economists to it, and with the sort of work and the quality of work, the living wage work, sort of things like worker cooperatives that share work more equally. We've got a much bigger task ahead of us, because we all, we know that shame is one of the most powerful human emotions, and humans will go to great lengths to avoid feelings of shame. And so if there's a much bigger job ahead of us, and luckily this is the movement around it. The other point I just briefly add is I think it's really heartening when folks are given the chance to sit down and have conversations together about the sorts of changes we need. And if you need, in a deliberative space, then they are really up for bold changes. And so look at the work of Scotland's recent Climate Assembly to see the sort of things that everyday people. These is 100 people who are selected on the basis that they represented Scotland, to see their ambition. And people might say, yeah, they say that, but then behaviour is not that. The evidence is that those apparent contradictions in what people say and what they do are actually smaller than we think of. We might jump on one or two and use that to sort of taint everyone. But the evidence is from groups like Common Cause say actually people are pretty good when they've got the sorts of things Jill was speaking about in place at aligning their behaviour with what they really need. So we really need to be working with all sorts of other skill sets and all sorts of other change agents to bring about the system change that's required to underpin these moves.
Oh, well, thank you for those answers, and just keeping an eye on the time and some of the questions that are coming through here. So if there's a question here around specific actions that you would like to see businesses in Scotland carry out to make reuse and repurpose cool and normal, and I suppose it's getting away from that that shame element that you've been talking about as well, Catherine. So in terms of actual changes that businesses can make, and the role that the business community has within this conversation around circular economy. I'll come to you, Jill, first, and I am conscious that we've only got a few minutes left. But what advice would you have for businesses that want to change? What are the important first steps, or what action would you like to see?
So I think businesses in Scotland would include businesses like these guys who design differently. Design so that I can upgrade my camera when I want a new camera. I don't have to buy another one of these guys with all of the resources, all of the materials that are in here, going in a drawer or going to one of my nephews who are very supportive of me getting these on a regular basis. But design differently, think differently. What is the benefit that your customers want from your product or service? And how can you deliver that in a way that has minimal resource impact? So think differently.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. In design and that initial planning, and once that happens, then we really are on the journey, more established journey. And Catherine, what advice would you give to business that want to engage from an economic perspective as well? And I think one of the questions that came through from the minister was, what support is there for companies that and businesses that do want to change packaging? I mean, that's easy to say, but it's maybe not practically possible. Right. So from that economic, the way they value our business, what advice would you have?
So there's a lot of, I think, more that we could be doing to inculcate in our economic ecosystem the sorts of businesses we need more of, whether that's much more leaning on the lever of procurement, even planning, but also what sort of businesses are celebrated. Who gets the government attention and the government largesse in terms of celebration? And I'd say that in answer to the previous question around what do businesses need to take is actually, I'd also flip it on its head and say, we need to be talking about the businesses that are doing this already much more than we currently do, and shining a spotlight on them. And I know, Jill, you and your colleagues at Zero Waste Scotland share an affection for Jaw Brew, which is an amazing brewery in Mulgai. And this chap, Mark, who runs that, he is so passionate about changing everything he does in his production systems to make it circular, even the little circles that keep the cans of beer together that others might use as plastic. He uses biodegradable plastic made of prawns. He uses bread to make one of his beer lines. We need to be talking about his work, celebrating that, because it is cool, that sort of activity. It's amazing what he's doing. He's got a beautiful tap room out there. So I think it also behoves all of us who see these amazing pioneers like Mark at Jaw Brew to really do, I know Zero Waste Scotland do a great job celebrating his sort of activities, but I think those sorts of businesses need to shout a little bit louder about what they're doing so that we hear that it's possible, that it's out there, and then we can go and buy their beer or buy those products or take our stuff to be serviced by them. The work of Remade, for example, doing more of supporting that sort of work, because then we'll see that it's possible, it's happening, and we start to build a momentum.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks very much.
A wee tiny shout out for the Zero Waste Scotland website. If you look in the COP26, there's loads of videos and case studies of businesses, communities and individuals who are doing things differently.
No, thank you very much indeed. And I think we're finishing on quite an optimistic note there, and a celebratory one as well, and inclusive. And of course, that's what this conference is all about, and giving our organisations a platform to celebrate the work that they've been doing throughout the year. So thank you very much for your presentations, your contributions, and for answering as many questions as well. Lots of very positive feedback coming through in the chat as well for you both. But in the meantime, a huge thank you to Catherine Trebek and Jill Farrell for being with us this morning. Thank you very much indeed. So we are now moving on to a break, a comfort break in our programme. And as you'll see from the programme, it's actually half an hour long, and that's to enable you to visit the Expo. So plenty of stands there for those of you who haven't been there already. Request more information, speak to exhibitors live, or use the networking function. You can look for people directly, or you can click on the random networking button, the take a chance, I'm calling it, button, to be matched with someone for a few minutes to chat about your organisation, their organisation. But we will be back at 11:30 here on the main stage for a very special keynote. So looking forward to seeing you all then. Enjoy the Expo and have a break. I'd now like to introduce our next speaker, who is the Chief Executive of Circular Communities Scotland, Michael Cook. And Michael, as you know, brings a wealth of experience from previous roles, including finance, IT consultancy, change management, and in the last decade, leadership roles within the charitable sector. He's going to talk to us about embracing a circular future. So I'm going to hand over to Michael Cook.
Hello. Thank you, Heather. Thank you for the introduction. And I hope you're enjoying the conference. Wasn't it great to hear from Graham there? And I bet we all heard something that we could implement in our own lives and learn from his example. My theme of this talk is the theme of our day, is the theme of the conference, and possibly, maybe it's a bit presumptuous to say this, but the theme of maybe the year or two, or the period that we're moving into for our sector. How do we embrace a circular future? Everything I'm going to say really is covered in a report that we published yesterday by that same topic. And thank you to all our members who provided information for this report, case studies, or just the stats of what their sector have done. And I'm just going to take a whirlwind tour through this report. We're really encouraged that even in these challenging times, we have a growing membership. The numbers are a bit small on the screen, but back in March 2019, we had 115 members, and that has grown to 180 today. In fact, the number we quoted in the impact report, 169, is already out of date, and that 11 new organisations have joined us since we did the survey. That growing membership, to me, speaks of growing engagement in all matters relating to the circular economy and the community response to climate change, which is a really encouraging trend. And this is some of the work that you're doing. We've just heard from someone about cycling, 20 bike reuse organisations, for example. But this infographic just shows the breadth, the variety of the different work, be it working with food, community fridges, sharing libraries, repair cafes, upcycling projects, and things like furniture reuse and clothing reuse. So many different organisations, some doing more than one of these things. That is what unites us, even though we work in different communities and doing different types of work. It all benefits community and it all benefits the planet. Not time to spotlight 180 organisations. I wish there was. That would be amazing. We're going to hear from a few specific organisations after I finish speaking, and I'm really looking forward to that, to hear what they've got to say. But we showcased, I think, 9 organisations, 9 impact reports, 9 case studies in the impact report, and you can see the images of some of those here. And we talk at CRNS about 4 Ps. It's interesting that Catherine had 4 Ps this morning. They were different Ps, but ours are quite simple. It's caring for the planet, taking care of people, taking care of the pounds, making our enterprises survive and thrive, and working in a local community, in a place. That's the 4 Ps that we often talk about and we used in our impact report just to show the impact the work that you are doing. And there's been some encouraging trends over the last year and some discouraging trends, or some challenging trends, not surprisingly, given the year or the 18 months that we've had. Staff are up by 8%, but volunteers are down by nearly 30%. And I think that puts quite a strain on staff teams. So I just want to acknowledge that. It must have been a challenging year for the organisations that you're running. Turnover has been up, believe it or not. That's partly because our membership has increased. So I think it's been flat, might be more accurate. And that, but the actual reuse and recycling figures are down in terms of tonnage, which again shouldn't be surprising to us because it's to do with HWRC sites and indeed high street shops having been closed for significant periods of time. Let's just get beneath the skin of that and just share some actual examples of the work that people are doing. Again, all featured in the impact report, and we'll post a link to that before I finish speaking. Green Hive, really doing well to celebrate their volunteers. It's been a challenging time for volunteers, and there's been some great ways in which they've managed to celebrate the value of volunteering and really care for their people. Shrub Co-op, obviously located in Edinburgh, and just how do you engage with a city centre location, a student population that you work with to really have a vision for a world without waste and working in that unique environment. Every environment is unique, of course. My clicker seems to have died. Just so we can move to the next slide, that would be great. Border Bikes in the and Just Cycle working together to. We've gone forward now. Let's head back. Sorry about that. Border Bikes working to keep people cycling in the border region, which obviously has benefits for the planet. Working in partnership with another organisation, and our own reuse consortium, which is continuing to grow, and that there the focus is on making it possible for local social enterprises to trade on a national procurement framework. Just a sort of a note of interest on this, we want to pay tribute to Leslie Campbell, our Reuse Consortium coordinator for the last 3 years, who's moving on to other things, and we also want to welcome Nicola, who will be joining us. And I do have to be honest, I feel a bit guilty here because Nicola's joining us from a member, so I sort of feel like we've stolen her. She used to work at Shrub Co-op, still does, I think, but Nicola will be joining us in December, and we hope that they find an excellent replacement at Shrub. But we're really excited to see what Nicola will bring to the role of Reuse Consortium coordinator with us. And she is here in the conference today, so do connect with her via chat if you can. It has been a tough year with COVID, and I've touched on some of those trends already, and the poll brings this out that people have found this challenging times. But this was what our survey showed, that confidence has increased since we asked this same question last year. 87% are somewhat or extremely confident about the recovery of their organisation, which I think is encouraging. Some people are still neutral or not confident at all, and I think that's not too surprising when you consider the challenges that organisations have faced on their reserves and on their teams during the last year. But we are pleased that is down from the year before. The top issues that people are talking about, again, not surprisingly, this is what you've told us. 63% say sustainable finance, supporting staff and dealing with health and safety implications, and regaining customer confidence. These are the challenges that we all face over the next year, is to get back to hopefully a new normal to some degree, but to keep the work of our organisations thriving despite the challenges of the pandemic. We have a role to support you and a role to represent you, and this is what you told us in terms of how you thought we were doing at that, in terms of rating our different events and our different communications. I just want to take this opportunity to pay a big thank you to my team who have just been working flat out during the pandemic in different environments, often from their dining room table, and just continuing to support the sector as best we can, sometimes often without leaving our home. We do hope that we can get back to visiting you and to holding in-person events in due course, but no doubt there will be an element of hybrid working that we take forward from this as one of the learning points from it, that we can do a lot remotely as well. But that's what our role in supporting you, and also acknowledging we have a role in representing the sector. And I take this very seriously. Last night I was at a cross-party group in the Scottish Parliament 2 days ago. I had a meeting with Lorna Snater, the minister that we've just heard from, talking about what we would love to see in the circular economy bill. So we are really active behind the scenes, seeking to represent the sector, and just some of the examples of the different levels of which we do that. And I think it's a real ripe time for us to be speaking into this context, because there is an openness. I think I picked that up even from the minister and what the talk this morning, an openness to hear about ways in which the community circular economy sector can be supported and is part of the solution to the transition that we need to make. So yeah, that's some of the ways that we're representing you, and we'll continue to do that in the coming year as a top priority, particularly as a circular economy bill is on the horizon. We're starting to be a bit bolder. Maybe it's part of our new identity, but we've got some clear policy asks in the impact report, and that's on the penultimate page. When you get your copy, you can turn to that. And here's just some of the examples that we believe will help really turbo boost the move towards a circular economy. And our technical colleagues are going to put a poll up where we list 5 of these policy asks, the 4 on the left, which could be part of a circular economy bill, and the general one on the right in terms of additional funding for the sector. And we ask you to rate them. How important do you think they are? Now, I'll be honest, we think they're all really important, and you can say that. But if you think one of them is less important, please say that too. So we're looking just to gauge the room in terms of, have we got it right? Have we heard you right? That these are things that are important. Things like having a national reuse target, things like banning product destruction, having set aside for reuse at every household waste recycling centre across Scotland, and really building reuse and circular economy into public procurement. And then the 5th one is greater funding, both at the local authority, reuse and repair, and for innovative models. We just included that as one question. So please tell us what you think in that poll, please. And the last question on the poll is about sharing libraries and repair cafes. And the reason we've added this is because of the announcement that the minister alluded to that we're really excited about. We put in a proposal jointly as in a partnership with Edinburgh Remakery and the Edinburgh Tool Library to set up and run a network for the next 3 years for sharing libraries and repair cafes. So that has been approved and that funding announced, and we're going to be doing that in the new year. So watch this space. We're going to be recruiting someone into a full-time role with ourselves to do this work. But we're also running an event on the 6th of December, again online, and there's an opportunity for you to attend that and start shaping that work and telling us what you think, what direction you think it should go. So I would really encourage you, if you are already running a sharing library or a repair cafe, or it's something you're thinking about, to come along to that event and get registered on that, and we'll put a link in the chat for that too. Can I just end by thanking you so much for all the work that you do. Thank you for your continued membership of Circular Communities Scotland. Thank you for supporting us in this transition to the new identity. And we are really proud to support and represent you, and look forward to doing more of that in the year ahead, whatever it may hold. And we will be posting a link into the chat. So please get for the impact report as well. I'd really encourage you to download a copy of that. We haven't printed any copies. It's all digital, all a PDF. But get your copy, have a look through that, see some of the inspiring case studies and trends that we're seeing, and look forward to seeing more of those great work in the year ahead. Thank you again for all you do, and I'll just hand back to Heather.
Thank you very much indeed, Michael. And the link is in the chat, and the poll is live, so it's all happening. And thank you for the overview and presenting the impact report. Thank you very much, Michael. And as I said, it's now time for our popular Spotlight on Circular Communities Scotland members session. We have 3 speakers for you today, and I think we're going to bring them all onto the main stage to start with. And let me introduce you to Ruth Stone. Hi, Ruth, Senior Low Carbon Communities Officer with Redeem Exchange. And we also have with us Bev Knight, who's Head of National Operations, Trade Right International CIC, also a board member of Circular Communities Scotland. Hi there, Bev. And we also have with us for this session Joanne Elston, who's Swap Shop Coordinator with Shrub Co-op. Hi, Joanne. And after we've heard from all three of our members, we will be having a Q&A session. So once again, please post questions in the Q&A box as we go along. But first up, I'm going to hand over to talk to us about the Edinburgh Reuse Map. I'm going to hand over to Ruth Stone.
Great, thank you. I think I should have my first slide, yep. So, hello everyone, I'm Ruth, I work at Changeworks, and I've been leading on the development of our Edinburgh Reuse Map, which I'm just going to talk you through now. So firstly, a very short history of the Reuse Map and how it came to be. The map originally was developed and designed as part of a project called Zero Waste Leith, which was funded through the European Regional Development Fund and launched in February 2019, just before lockdown, as the Leith Reuse Map, with 66 organisations offering reuse and recycling services within the Leith area of Edinburgh. After the close of the Zero Waste Leith project, the decision was made with the City of Edinburgh Council to develop the Leith Reuse Map to cover the whole of Edinburgh, creating a city-wide resource. The map launched as the Edinburgh Reuse Map in December 2020 during the series of lockdowns. This affected the project as it meant that the vast majority of places on the map were either closed or only offering a reduced service. However, despite this, we continued to market the map, focusing on organisations which were offering COVID-19 secure collection or delivery, or the items which were considered essential purchases, such as white goods, repairs, or bike repairs. In total, the map now has 491 organisations covering 3 categories where people can give, get, or fix an item. So a quick demo of how the map works. On the main page, we have 3 main categories of give, get, and fix, and also an option where people can add an organisation to the map. When you click through one of these categories, you're taken to choose from 11 categories, which narrows down by the item type. And then within there is the option to borrow, buy second-hand, or for free. And each of the different give, get, fix options generates different options at this point in the map. You can press the Let's Go, and this takes you through to a list of organisations which match your search, and you can press the map view to see where they are in the city and zoom in to the area which you're most interested in. All of the data behind the map is stored and maintained in our bespoke CRM, which feeds directly into the map. As the map has grown so much since relaunching as the Edinburgh Reuse Map, and we now have almost 500 businesses and organisations on the map, it's become necessary to add in some filtering options to help users narrow down their search. So as of last month, users are now able to narrow down their search by organisations which are able to collect or deliver items, and whether they are Revolve members, and also by the type of organisation. Furthermore, we added a search function to the map for users who know which shop they're looking for already and just want to find out some information on the store. And this has a secondary advantage of making it much easier for organisations on the map to find themselves in order to edit their organisation information. As I mentioned, the map was launched during the pandemic when the majority of shops and organisations on the map were closed. Despite this, the response we had on our social media campaign was incredibly positive, and you can see from the overall number of engagements and shares here that this is a resource that people are really interested in using. And as everything has opened up since the launch, this has just become a far more useful resource for the Edinburgh community. As expected, the number of users to the map have increased drastically since lockdown lifted, and these are the total numbers to date. We've had over 15,000 users to the map, over 2,000 of which have returned more than once, and we're particularly pleased to see that that number of returning users is steadily increasing. To date, we've had over 20,000 completed journeys, and this is defined by the number of people that have made it through successfully to a results page on the map. So in other words, we've had over 20,000 successful searches. We use Google Analytics to see how people are using the map and track trends. And since launching the map, these are the 5 most common searches. you can see that they are all almost for giving or donating items rather than getting or fixing items. And this is interesting and something which we'll continue to monitor and see whether this trend continues. If the trend does continue, it may be that this is a sign that people are more likely to give into the circular economy rather than to get from it. And if this is the case, it opens up other questions for all of us about how we can encourage people to buy secondhand, fix items that they already have, and also where there are particularly areas for further education on the benefits of doing so. This is just one example of how the map can be used as a research tool to develop a better understanding of how people engage with the circular economy. Finally, we're always looking at ways to enhance the power of the Edinburgh Reuse Map, and we're currently in the process of developing social media integration, which will make it super easy for users to share the map and the stores that they find are offering circular economy services across their networks. We hope this development should be live before the end of the year, so watch this space. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Ruth. An amazing service there. Some fantastic data as well, thought-provoking data. So thank you for sharing that. And next up, to tell us about Redeem Exchange, I'm going to hand over to Bev Knight. Bev.
Thanks, Heather. I want to obviously chat you through Redeem Exchange and how we got to where we are today through quite a journey over the last 18 months. And I will take you through a few slides just to give you a bit of background. So we're part of TradeRight International. They are a natural skincare manufacturer by trade, and our founders began in Ghana in 2008, where they were supporting women to harvest shea nuts. In 2012, we began manufacturing of natural skincare products with the shea butter, and we then, in 2020, like many other organisations, were faced with sort of a situation of change, if you like, obviously when COVID came about, and we were forced to really consider our options. And as we got to the point of possibly looking at furlough, we were approached by the Scottish Government to be on the task force for hand sanitizer. Within 3 weeks, we completely adapted the business, and I think that goes to show for social enterprises, we are really quick to adapt. We can change to suit the organisational needs at the time and what's happening out in the external environment. And we were supported by Zero Waste Scotland to launch Redeem Exchange because we became aware of a shortage of bottles within the hand sanitizer requirements. And we officially launched Redeem Exchange in September 2020. So we ran a pilot, and we were operating within 23 facilities within NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde. And this picture here just demonstrates really the circular economy approach that we are looking to achieve. So the box we have out on sites, the bottles, once they're used, are dropped into the box. And when that's full, we go out and collect the bottles from the facility. We bring that back to our hub in Greenock, and we check the bottles to make sure that there's no damage, and we then wash them using an adapted dishwasher that's actually used for the hospitality industry for glass bottles. We then refill the bottles, and then that circle goes back to where it's come from. So we, in this example, obviously back to the NHS so that the circles can start again. What we aim to do here is to really design out waste. What that means is we want people to care for their plastic bottles rather than seeing them as waste. We want them to actually realise that they've bought it and they own it. This has actually never been done before. People haven't been reusing plastic bottles. It's been done for aluminium, it's been done for glass, but as far as we're aware, not for plastic as yet. Our estimation is that we can reuse the bottle up to 50 times. That obviously needs to be communicated, that we need to look after the bottles. They need to be seen as a financial asset. But if we can do that, and based on numbers that we've been given by NHS health boards, we believe that we can reduce their carbon footprint by 90%. The idea of what we're doing is hugely transferable. Of course, I'm talking about NHS today because that's where our pilot's been and where we're sort of growing Redeem Exchange just now. But we're also in conversations with construction companies, retail, hospitality, education. So it's massively transferable. Savings, as I said, we're really trying to convince people to see plastic bottles now as being a financial asset. And what that means then is by not having to buy the bottle back and actually just buying the contents, they can redirect their spend towards more important things such as recruitment, training, equipment, etc. So for the impacts, we have strong values. I am going to repeat I'm going to do 3 of the 4 Ps. So people, planet and pounds. We are a supported business. We support people within areas of deprivation. So we're based in Greenock, which is deemed the most deprived town in Scotland. We help people who are possibly coming through recovery or people with offending backgrounds. So we have been supporting people who are coming towards the end of a life sentence within the prison service, and we support people with no experience. And our aim is really to help them build up a sort of passport of learning, if you like, so that they can actually gain the certification to take with them and to get evidence of sort of the work that they've been doing. An additional environmental impact that we've actually been considering more recently as sanitizer is sort of approaching its end of shelf life is actually being able to repurpose it. And that's really an opportunity to, again, save that going from or into incineration or landfill. We can actually begin to change that into screen wash. And of course, this model is replicable. I knew I wouldn't be able to say that word today. And we look to move our model to different areas within Scotland and create green jobs as a result. So we can actually take all the opportunities I've discussed here for our Greenock office or site and take that out to other areas. So just to summarise, and for anybody who's already been along to our Expo booth, you may have seen this video already, but I think this just gives a full rounded picture of who we are and what we do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bev. I think that was a fantastic overview of a real first with tremendous impact and benefits that you highlighted there. So thank you for that. And now it's time to hear about the Shrub Textiles project from Joanne Elston. So I'll hand over to Joanne.
Hi, thank you. I just want to say at the beginning that there is a lot more to Shrub than what we're doing here. So please, if you're interested, do get in touch. But yes, I'm going to talk through the textiles things today. So I don't know how many people that are here know about it or not, but I thought I'd give a little bit of a history of kind of how Shrub Co-op started. So there is Edinburgh Students Housing Cooperative in Edinburgh, and it's mostly students from the universities, and they were recognising that every year new students would come to halls of residence, and they would move in and they would need to buy a toaster and a kettle and some blankets and all these kinds of things. And then at the end of the year, they might not know what they were doing over summer, so they would throw it all out. And then the next year, students would come and they'd be buying exactly the same things, and they kind of were seeing this cycle of waste. And they thought that it was really stupid, basically. So they started to run collections. So at the end of the university years, they would go around all the halls of residence. They would have big collections. They would take all the things, store it over summer, and give it away for free at the beginning of the next year for the students who were moving in that year, or just any students around, to be honest. So they were reducing the cost for the students and also preventing all of those things from going into landfill. So that was kind of the first thing that Shrub did. And obviously it wasn't just around textiles, but that was quite a big part of it. And moving on from that, they decided that they could be doing similar things year round rather than just having to do it once a year. And that was where the swap shop started. So it was originally a direct swap. You could maybe come in with a t-shirt and a pair of shoes and take away a dress or a jacket or something, to be able to allow people to get new things without having to go and buy new, and to recognize that sometimes you're getting rid of something, but it's still absolutely perfectly fine to wear. There's also the Textiles Matters project, which I don't know too much about because it was before my time. But again, it was starting to look at the textile industry, and I think they were running some film screenings on films around what was going on, and again, trying to raise awareness of this, as well as just kind of providing a solution to the problem. So currently what we're doing, the swap shop can't be quite a direct swap anymore because our rent is really expensive. But we're still trying to create a circular economy around what we're doing there. So if you're a member of our cooperative, either through paying a small annual fee or volunteering some time with us, when you donate to our swap shop, we price up all of your donations and we give you a fifth of that value back in tokens. So if you brought in, say, a couple of jumpers and a couple of pairs of trousers, you might get 3 or 4 tokens back, depending on the quality of them. And each of those tokens is worth £1 to spend in our shop. So that can be on clothes, shoes, books, bric-a-brac, all the different things. And so the idea is that we ask our members to bring in really great quality things to us, and then they can take away some equally good quality things from us, which reduces their dependency on having to go to especially high street and fast fashion stores. We've also started running some events. Most of these we were doing before lockdown, and then again we're doing them now afterwards. So we've started doing a direct clothes swap once a month that is currently free of charge. So you can come in, you can bring however much you want, and you can take however much you want away. We always get left with more because there's just so much stuff in the world. I think we had a bit of a fear that maybe people would be coming and taking loads of things, but actually there's just always so much left over at the end. So we've been doing one a month of those ourselves, and then we've also been doing some in partnership with other organisations around the city. For example, Edinburgh Fat Club, in recognition of the fact that it's really, really hard to find larger size clothes, especially secondhand. And most recently we did one with one of the university societies and a clothes swapping app called Doppel, and we had 48 people along, and saved, I think, was it 50 kilos of clothes in one afternoon, which is pretty great. We've also been doing some sewing, repair and upcycling workshops to help people who aren't ready to let go of things yet learn how to fix them and mend them. The amount of things that you get in charity shops that have a couple of buttons missing and will be thrown out just because of that is completely ridiculous when all of those things are really fixable. So the more people we can teach about those skills, the more these things don't have to go to landfill or be passed on in the first place. We've also been running some film screenings again. So we did The True Cost, which is a really amazing film about the true cost of fast fashion. And we'd really like to do some more. So if anyone knows of any other films that you're allowed to watch for free, that would be really great because there's licensing issues around most of them. We've also still been doing the free shops and collections. We've done that every single year, apart from obviously the COVID year. And we've now started doing them in the community as well, running free shops at Edinburgh Climate Festival. And most recently we went over to COP26, which I think is the first time that Shrub Co-op was in Glasgow. And it was really amazing to see the response that it got there, and people's response to being able to get things for free, because we're just so ingrained in having to buy things and contribute to the capitalist model. So that was really nice to do and to kind of spread the word. And we've been invited back to hopefully do some more events with that around the COP26 legacy project. In terms of the local benefit of what we're doing, we've been providing access to affordable and or free clothing to a lot of people for a long time now. Which was especially relevant over COVID. And we also have our food sharing project, where we were giving out free or cheap food as well that has been given away by supermarkets at the end of the day. So between those two projects, I think a lot of people have had a lot of benefit from it, especially recently. And we also try and support as many reuse partners as we can throughout the city. As some of you may know, pretty much every charity shop gets far more given to it than it's able to sell. So we have a lot of things that we've put out in the shop and they haven't sold in a month or two, so we pass them on to other people, or some things that we don't put out in the shop because we just have too many pairs of jeans in this world. So we pass a lot on to other community groups. We try and keep them as local as possible to reduce the kind of carbon mileage of the transport. But again, if you know anyone else in Edinburgh who would be looking for clothes, we're happy to support anyone as long as they're doing a good thing. So yeah, that's our project.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Joanne. That was a fantastic overview of the Shrub project and especially the textiles, which I think is resonating with lots of people at the moment. And great to see the extending your influence as well. That's brilliant. And I'm sure being here will also help contribute in that way. And we've got some questions coming through, lots of positive comments in the chat as well. If I go back to the beginning, actually, I think Ruth, your map was very popular, and indeed all cities, it seems, our members in other cities would like one. So one of the questions is, can it be adapted for other towns and cities? And I suppose a follow up would be sort of funding for that. What would your advice be?
Yeah, so this map is funded through our partnership with the City of Edinburgh Council, which is why it's restricted to Edinburgh at the moment. But we would always be happy to have discussions with organisations with funding about similar resources. So what I would say is just get in touch with myself after the event if you're looking for support, and we can have a chat about how we can develop a successful similar project.
Well, that's a great offer, because there are a couple of questions in here in terms of the platform used and some technical questions as well. But it looks like we need to speak to other local authorities and get them on the same page. So that's great. And Bev, I think there was a couple of questions came through around the NHS project as well. One around education, I think. Was it challenging to get NHS workers to think in terms of not throwing away plastic bottles or to be able to specifically keep them for this project? And then a secondary question, what next after this particular NHS project? Where would you most like to move next?
Challenge, absolutely. I think the NHS are doing a massively wonderful job at the moment, and actually to try and sort of instigate a new process during a pandemic is quite difficult. One of the biggest challenges, I guess, is we've not been able to go out on site, so we've not been able to actually chat to people and go through the process. So we're very reliant on the message being portrayed through management and the facilities teams and people like that. I think when we have the boxes on site, they are used and they're definitely, seeing the purpose of it. And as we sort of are in place longer, and the bottles obviously as being seen as having that circular effect, because from the beginning we were actually taking any bottle, any hand sanitizer bottle that was empty, and then we were taking those back in and relabeling them. But as time goes by, they'll see the Redeem Exchange bottles coming back through the system, and there'll be more recognition. But the communication is key to the success, and actually getting the buy-in from people on the floor, if you like, is really what's going to make it successful. Sorry, Heather, just remind me of the other question.
Yeah, no, there was another question around what business project next for
what next, of course.
Reusing a plastic bottle. You did mention one or two ideas, so I just wondered if you had something in the pipeline.
Yeah. Well, besides sort of, Scotland domination, I guess, we are very keen to sort of look at any options. I mean, everyone that we're talking to really likes the concept. We've been asked whether we might be able to do iodine. We've been asked whether we could actually look at doing, sort of other plastic bottles within the healthcare industry. Because we're a natural skincare manufacturer by trade, what we are looking to do is integrate that with our skincare products as well. So that also leads into the hospitality areas, and with construction, etc. We are able to maybe, as an example, give a full sort of catalogue, if you like, of sanitizer and soaps and products that can be used on various sites. So I think from an upscale perspective, we are looking to sort of take on health board by health board as such as we progress, and that will then lead into us being able to open additional hubs with social enterprises within local areas who can actually collect the bottles locally, take the bottles in, wash them, and then we'll have them back in Greenock to refill and return. So yeah, we've got lots of plans. The model is definitely one that we can scale up, so we're just looking at sort of trying to get as much noise made about Redeem Exchange so it's recognised.
Oh, fantastic. And thank you. Joanne, there's been quite a wee flurry of questions come through at the end of your talk as well. Everyone reminiscing about their student days and how they would have loved to have had something like this project. So one question, because you did say that obviously you were speaking about textiles in particular, but there was a wider project there. And does it include furniture, or is that too bulky to store? What someone's asking, just reminiscing again about the same IKEA furniture bit bought every year and disposed of. What's your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, very relatable problem. We don't do furniture, unfortunately. Being in the city centre, the rents are obviously really high, so we just can't afford enough space. Is it Remake Scotland that I think we were talking to a couple of weeks ago, and they're a bit further out in a bit more of a rural area, so they do furniture. I think there are a lot of other initiatives doing it, but in general, yeah, it does just need a lot more space, which unfortunately we can't afford. But there are the organisations there.
Exactly, and making those links and you being able to send people in that direction, perhaps help facilitate in terms of transport and everybody getting together if there's a few items. That's that in itself is a service, isn't it? And there's also
I was just going to say that's actually one of the things that we've always tried to do. Is just that whenever there's something that we can't take, we always try and recommend it to other people. So in the shop we've got a list of all the other organisations that we know of in Edinburgh that can take the things that we can't. Because again, it's just about preventing things from going into landfill as much as possible.
Absolutely, and Ruth, you obviously are providing a service around that as well in terms of being able to help people identify the right service for them. So there's a connection there. Do you see furniture as being one of the main drivers, or do you think textiles is coming through quite strongly too?
Textiles is always one of our highest searches, but in the last few months we've had quite a lot of searches for both giving furniture and getting furniture. So some things happened in the last few months recently where people were certainly more interested in that area of the circular economy. So yeah, it's really interesting to kind of track these trends and see where people are. As I think there are particular types of items where people quite quickly think, okay, yeah, I can get a secondhand sofa or something like that. And then there are other item types where maybe it just doesn't occur to people that they could potentially shop secondhand for that. So it's about just creating that space, I think, and educating.
Yeah, I think that's coming through as quite a strong theme from all of you, and indeed our speakers this morning as well. And in terms of Joanne, educating the public away from fast fashion, are there any particular engagement techniques that you think are particularly good for this? I see somebody else off the back of that question has said that reaching out to teenagers who might not be able to afford new clothes and don't want to go to a charity shop, but a student-run swap might be quite cool. So, what are your thoughts in terms of behavioural change around this and engaging with audiences? I'll start with Joanne, but I think it's a question for everybody as well.
Yeah, definitely. Again, something that we've thought about a lot. And I think we've really tried to make a big shift in terms of moving away from blaming people. I think that so much of what society does at the moment is blame you. If you're still using fast fashion, if you're still consuming things and all of this kind of stuff. And as most of us know, guilt is not a productive emotion. There's no point trying to force people to feel guilty. So a lot of what we've been doing recently is trying to give people really simple steps. So part of the kind of purpose of our shop is to give people a very concrete place that they can come to and that they know that it's better than fast fashion. We've been doing some posts on social media called Lazy Ways, which is basically really easy steps that you can take to extend the life of your clothing by, for example, washing it at lower temperatures, caring for it properly, lots of these different kinds of things. And we've also created a fabric awareness booklet. I think like everything, there is never really a one right answer in terms of all of these things. So a lot of what we've been trying to do is to educate people around the things so that they can make their own decision. So for example, with the fabric awareness booklet, it's got lots of different information about different kinds of textiles, the sustainability issues around each of them, the social welfare issues around each of them, what they're used for, because I think the more that people know about all of these things, the more information that they've got, the more they can make their own decision. And yeah, as I guess all of us know, again, if you make your own decision around something, you're a lot more likely to stick to it than if someone else is telling you what to do.
No, absolutely. And Bev, you touched on it too about behaviour change and education and the steps you were taking. So sort of more generally, what do you find most effective?
Just recently with the run up to COP26, I mean, I'm moving away from perhaps the teenagers as such, but we got in touch with local primary schools they've all got eco groups, and they, you know, from our perspective, from the plastic reuse, they're very engaged in that perspective and want to be part of that sort of change, and are trying to, you know, sort of influence their schools and their education systems to bring change on board. And we had the schools actually design some posters that we put alongside when we were trying to shine the spotlight on those that were actually linked in with Redeem Exchange. And that was really effective. So I think there was a comment made earlier that, you know, perhaps not using, but actually having the younger generations responsible for making the change. Quite right. I guess we're all responsible for making the changes, but actually they're a driving force in taking that forward for us, because they've come into this sort of, you know, right at the beginning, whereas for us it's been a change over time. And I think it's very much something that they want to be part of.
Absolutely. And I think, Ruth, you spoke about social media and wanting to extend the map's usage of that. I mean, do you see that as being quite central to behaviour change, or what are your thoughts on that?
Definitely, yeah. This was an interesting project and an interesting campaign to run, because it was during lockdown, so it was all done digitally, which normally we would be out in the community a bit more chatting with, but we did it all digitally, and actually the amount of interaction we got with people from that, and the things that really caught people's eye was where we could say this, where we could show them that these small changes actually do make an impact. So kind of, you know, saying how many clothes go to landfill and how they can save if they just take stuff to charities instead, or, you know, how much carbon does a new bike kind of, you know, put into the world rather than getting your own, and actually bringing things back to kind of just day-to-day things that people can do and making it really accessible and showing that those really small changes do make a difference. Because I think sometimes it just feels so big and so overwhelming, and people think, oh, but does it really matter if I half fill my kettle rather than, you know, to the top? And actually it does make a difference if we all do it, but it's just getting that message across. So I think that's a huge part of behaviour change, is just making sure that people understand that we're all in it together, and if we all make these small steps towards that. But yeah, we have found social media, and we've done quite a few kind of targeted ad campaigns, like specifically into Edinburgh postcodes, and that where we can kind of talk about really local stores and local projects that are going on, and those have all had really great impact. So I think it's a really powerful tool.
Absolutely. And I think we have time for one last question, which is, I think, for all of you. So, but if we can answer it reasonably briefly, because I think it's one that that maybe could be a bit open-ended. But one of the challenges for new circular initiatives is often the funding. So how can we encourage local communities to invest in local circular initiatives and businesses and buy into the journey? So I suppose it's about funding and also about community engagement. So just from your experiences, what jumps to mind? Bev, well, I'll start with you. What do you think about the funding sort of map, but also local community engagement around this too?
The funding is always a challenge. It really is, and I can't really give any explanation or any support in trying to sort of cheat that, unfortunately. I think from a community's perspective, the message I always try to give is just do what you can, because any little part that we do in order to sort of make changes is huge, and don't always look for the biggest impact. Any impact is good.
Very good advice there, I think, actually. Indeed, for funding and community engagement. Joanne, obviously engaging with communities around students, but probably wider as well when it comes to donations and funding. What have been your experiences and best ways forward?
Again, something we struggle with a lot. Would love to be able to give advice, but we don't have it figured out yet. I think as a cooperative, one of the main things for us in terms of the community building side is the fact that we are cooperative and anyone can get involved. We are open at every level of decision making for people to ask us what we're doing, ask us why we're doing it, who has the power to make these things and why do they have the power to do that. And I think that is a way to really engage the community because they feel really invested in it, because they know that at any point they can come and have their opinion listened to or get involved in running it. And I think that kind of thing, you do just get a lot more investment from the community in doing that, and it feels like you really are part of the community. And I really hope that that's something that is funded more in the future, because I think it's a really key way for us to grow out of this climate change crisis that we're in at the moment.
No, absolutely. Excellent points and a really good model to keep talking about. I agree. And Ruth, finally, what are your closing thoughts on the projects, the funding and engagement going forward from today?
Yeah, I think in terms of community engagement, that's always key to all of the projects that we run, and we always make sure that we do a bit of a research campaign beforehand to, what is the identity of this community, what does matter to them, what do they struggle with, what are people talking about, so that you can make sure that you're getting the right messages across and that you're talking to people about the issues and in the way that they're going to respond. And also just the power of community groups. We always make sure that we get in touch with community groups when we're doing a project. We introduce them to the project, get them on board, ask them to share our social medias, ask if we can come and do a talk for them, because actually it's just a really powerful way of getting the message out there to people.
No, well, thank you for that, indeed, and for sharing all your experiences. This is always one of the favourite parts of our day with our delegates, and actually from the presentations we've just heard, it's very clear why it is, and for taking so many questions as well. I know this has been a really useful, informative part of the day, so a huge thank you to Ruth, Bev and Joanne for showcasing those projects and being our members sharing with us today. Thank you all. And that takes us to our lunch break, and the Expo will still be live. There'll still be the opportunity to do plenty of networking. So make use of the functionality on the site while you also perhaps have a break to stretch the legs and to have a little bit of sustenance. But I look forward to seeing you on the main stage here back at 1:30, where I'll introduce you to the breakout sessions and just give you a little bit of direction as to what will be happening during the second half of our day. But in the meantime, I'd like to thank all of our speakers. I'd like to thank all of you, the delegates, for asking questions and being part of the sessions so far. Enjoy your break, and I will see you at 1:30. Welcome back to the main stage, and thank you to Kieran, Jimmy, Emily and Sam, who led those breakout sessions twice. We're very grateful for your involvement, and to the moderators too. Now we're going to have 3 presentations followed by our final Q&A of the day. I'm delighted to introduce our first speaker for this session, and that's Claire Downey, who is Policy and Research Director with the Rediscovery Centre, which is the National Centre for the Curricular Economy in Ireland. And prior to that, Claire was an executive at the Community Resources Network and a former national coordinator at the Community Reuse Network in Ireland. So let's welcome Claire Downey onto the main stage to talk to us about bringing it into the mainstream, a reuse and repair target for Ireland. Over to you, Claire.
Thank you very much, Heather, and thanks also to Circular Community Scotland for having me here today. I'm absolutely delighted to be talking about the progress we've been making on getting a target for reuse and repair here in Ireland. I guess I know Michael mentioned earlier as well that it would be fantastic to have a target in Scotland too, and the need for some research into how to measure reuse, and hopefully some of what I'll talk about will be and help inform some of that. So I guess what's the value of a target, first of all? A target's really about creating that policy focus and hopefully ensuring there are policy measures that help you to reach the target or objective. And I think it's useful to look at what some of the other sectors have done with a target. And actually, as I was looking this up, it turns out that it's exactly 20 years ago that the first Renewable Electricity Directive was introduced at EU level, which set a target for renewable electricity. And at that time, Ireland had less than 20 megawatts of installed wind capacity. We now have the third highest level per capita in the world. And that's thanks to having a target, but importantly, also thanks to having the policy measures to back that target. In particular, financial measures like a payment per kilowatt hour, a guaranteed payment on the price earned for wind generation, and also other policy measures like priority access to the grid. We've, of course, seen something very similar happen with recycling. The incredible growth in recycling thanks to targets and supports, which is subsidies per tonne of material recycled, thanks to targets set out in the Framework Directive, the WEEE Directive, the Packaging Directive, and others. I think that reuse is where these sectors were 20 years ago, and hopefully with the introduction of a target, we'll see similar amount of progress. Of course, the Waste Framework Directive talks about introducing a target for reuse, but the time frame is very loose on this. The Framework Directive wording is that the Commission will examine data on reuse by 2024 with the view to considering the feasibility of a target for reuse subsequently. And indeed, even this data on reuse, the collection process that the Commission initially drafted in its guidelines, was also very loose. They were only going to seek sort of qualitative data on what member states are doing to help reuse and what nice campaigns are being run. But thanks to the intervention of the Reuse Network Europe, speaking after me, and of which Circular Community Scotland is a member, that was considerably strengthened. And now the Commission will be gathering data on reuse, as in how much reuse is happening in different member states, if available. And that really will help to inform a quantitative target. And it does sort of underline the importance of being able to get data on reuse. So we started to look at this back in 2018 in Ireland. We recognised a need to be able to measure reuse. So we asked for some research funding from the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, on a project which ran over 2 years to try and scope and measure how much reuse was taking place in Ireland. We called it Q to Reuse, or qualifying and quantifying the reuse sector. The project was led by Clean Technology Centre in partnership with the Rediscovery Centre and Community Resources Network Ireland. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the Rediscovery Centre, where I now work, it's Ireland's national centre for circular economy. It has 4 social enterprises in textiles, bicycles, paint and furniture reuse, as well as an education programme, a research programme, which I'm heading up, and a visitors centre, and has been working on metrics for some time, both environmental and economic and social metrics for the reuse sector. So I guess the first step for our Q to Reuse project was to try and scope or define what types of reuse activities we would measure. And what we did is we followed the definition from the Framework Directive, which first of all requires that there is no intention to discard the item, which is a bit of a grey area, but assuming that the owner does not intend to discard but wants it to be reused, the next part of the definition is that there is an exchange of hands of that product. So any activities like repair as a service or sharing or renting are not included in the scope of this methodology. And it's not to say they're not important, and there shouldn't also be targets for those activities. And that's another piece of research and another question. But for this research, we focus just on where a product changes hands. And what we did then is we looked at 3 different channels where products are passed into the reuse sector. First of all, on the left-hand side, the informal relationship-based exchange, which is where you have, for example, hand-me-downs or goods being, swapped or exchanged within businesses or schools, for example. Then in the middle, you can see centralized exchange, where products are physically passed into a collection point or through a retail store, for example. And then on the right-hand side, we had online exchanges. From an early stage, we recognized that that informal relationship-based exchange would not only be extremely difficult to measure, and indeed the Commission has also looked at how to measure this and suggested maybe household surveys every 3 years, and then that was all sort of abandoned because not only is it hard to measure, but also a target is probably unlikely, or policy measures with a target are probably unlikely to really affect that type of reuse. So we focused instead on the centralized and the online exchange. And in particular, we looked at where the products are passed on to the next user. I won't say end user because in reuse, you can reuse and reuse and reuse. And that reuse point is the point of measurement. So where is that product exchanged or sold to the next user? And through the centralized channel, you can see down the middle, we looked at different business types or business categories. And we set out sort of businesses that were working with single product types, for example, a secondhand bike store, or even a new bike store that also sells secondhand bikes, or a bookstore that also sells secondhand books. And we also looked then at multiple product type outlets, for example, classic charity retailer. And we have a huge number here, as I'm sure you have in Scotland as well, of charity retailers that fit that description. So we looked at those types of sort of retail businesses with single or multiple product types, and we also looked at marketplaces and depots. And of course, then as I mentioned, on the right-hand side, we looked at online exchange platforms. It was important to create these categories for the business types because they measure differently and they have different types of products for the purposes of the quantification, which comes next. For this study, we also didn't include any electrical equipment or food or construction and demolition products, although we did include salvage yards, and that was because we were asked to exclude them by the EPA because they're covered by other directives. Well, in total, through this definition, we mapped all of the reuse activities that fit these descriptions by category, and we identified 1,000, I'm using the computer. We identified 1,260 reuse centres altogether. And of those, the majority identified as social enterprises or NGOs. And that was really important and has been really important in showing the value and importance of social enterprise in this sector in delivering reuse and delivering the circular economy indeed. The next step then for this project was to try and quantify how much reuse is taking place at the 1,260 identified reuse centres. So what we did here is got a representative sample. We approached over 100 reuse businesses and got data back from 56 altogether. And then we did a deep dive with 20 to really track from the point of donation through to the point of exchange, how products flow through the system, the impact of repair, for example, where there's leakage, where products go into recycling versus reuse and so on. And we developed, based on the data that we were able to get from those businesses, a kind of average number of units or products that were exchanged per category of business, per store, effectively, if you think of it that way. So how many secondhand bikes are typically sold per secondhand bike store? And of course, it depends on size, but for the purposes of this initial data collection, we had to rely on the data that we had. And then we converted that number of products exchanged into a weight. And to do that, we used these product weight protocols. There's tables of hundreds of categories of products. So everything from couches to women's tops, to shoes, to handbags, and the associated average weight. So we looked at all of these European data and also some data that had been developed by some of the CRNI members in Ireland and developed kind of recommended number of categories that people should report to. So we identified 27 categories that people are kind of used to reporting to. For example, men's clothing, women's clothing, steel frame bikes, other bikes, certain types of bric-a-brac media, and so on. So the second step of quantification is converting the units into weight. And then what we did is scale up that weight according to how many businesses out of the 1,260 fit into that category. For example, 200 out of the 1,260 were secondhand bike stores, so we scaled up those bike figures. It is, of course, a very rough estimate, and we hope that with the introduction of a target, we'll get more people reporting data directly, and we'll have much better database of data. And we also identified another way to maybe help validate the data we get from this methodology, which would be to look at pricing. So what's the average sales price and what's the total income? If we can get data from, for example, enterprise or trade statistics, we would be able to kind of back calculate how many units are being sold by these different types of businesses. There's a bit of work to do there. In the end, we got to a figure of 5.5 kilos per person, or 27,000 tons, being reused according to the definitions that we use and within the scope of this project. And as I said, we don't have electrical goods in here, so it's probably slightly higher, but that does align with the figures that Steer and I had been gathering on its members' activities. So we're relatively happy with that. And because we now have a methodology or have been working on it, we were able to really push for the introduction of targets in Ireland. And I'm delighted to say this year that was put onto a statutory basis. So we now have a circular economy bill. It's going through the final stages of pre-legislative scrutiny, and it commits to introducing targets for the use of reused and repaired products and materials. And that is careful wording that reflects that exchange of hands. So it is as we defined reuse here in this methodology. There are a number of success factors that we identified that will make sure that this target works. First of all, of course, reporting has to be simple enough for those in the sector, particularly social enterprise and charities, to work with. And as I said, we really tried to narrow down how many categories or how the complexity of reporting for that purpose. Also, we identified a need to support or reward businesses for reporting data. For example, could you provide some kind of grant scheme or operational supports? And I suppose more generally, to make sure that you do meet the target, we proposed that some kind of, per ton subsidies would be provided. They are provided for recycling, as I mentioned earlier, in order to ensure we meet recycling targets. So we should see something similar come in for reuse. And then, as I said, capital supports to introduce, for example, EPOS systems, which not everyone has, which would really help improve the data reporting. Obviously, we need ambition. We do feel that we have the potential to double that reuse target. I didn't put a time frame in there, but by 2030. We need to make sure all our targets align. There are discussions around targets for consumption, around material circular use rates, and so on. So any subsequent targets or additional targets have to all speak to each other and align with each other. We also think there's scope to introduce some kind of job target that's aligned with the reuse target, as is done in Flanders. And it would be fantastic to strengthen the connection between climate targets and climate emissions reporting and a reuse target as well. And there's probably another bit of research behind that. And finally, of course, for any target or policy measure, it's critical that we have regular progress reporting, that corrective actions are introduced if we start to stray from the right direction, that meeting the target, and that there are repercussions for failure to meet the target as well. So that's a very quick round trip of where we are in terms of our target. As I mentioned, that bill is going through pre-legislative scrutiny. We hope to see targets introduced in our National Waste Management Plan for a Circular Economy, which would be due out next year. So hopefully they will kick off in 2022. And the research itself that I will talk through today, the Q2 Reuse project, is due for publication shortly. It's just been approved by the EPA last week, so hopefully we'll be able to share that with anyone. But in the meantime, I'm very happy to take any questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Claire. Indeed, you will be back for our Q&A shortly, but thank you for that fascinating report on that study there, and also the importance of targets and data, really, I think, coming through strongly there. Now I'm going to move on to introduce our next speaker, and that's Jana Zukova, who is Network Development and Innovation Manager for Reuse. Jana is devoted to supporting and empowering Reuse members particularly in the practical aspects of their activities in reuse, repair, and social entrepreneurship. She leads capacity building of the network by facilitating exchange of good practices, business models, and innovation. She also coordinates key support services both among Reuse members and external partners. So I'm pleased to welcome onto main stage Jana Zakova to talk to us about practical examples from a social and circular economy across Europe. Jana, over to you.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. First of all, thanks so much for inviting us as well. I'm really delighted to be here, and I've been listening throughout the whole day to the really interesting presentation. My name is Jana, and I'm here on behalf of Reuse. And I would like to talk about some good practice examples from our network from all across Europe. I've heard some amazing examples of your activities earlier today, so this should also help you inspire your work. First of all, Reuse is an international network representing social enterprises active in reuse, repair, and recycling. So you can imagine Reuse as an equivalent of Circular Communities Scotland, but on the international level, primarily in Europe. And our members are social enterprises who are collecting unwanted goods and then sorting, repairing, upcycling, etc., and then reselling in their secondhand shops with the main aim to create jobs and trainings for people who are disadvantaged in different ways. Here you can see the list of our members, and I just wanted to highlight that Circular Community Scotland is our members and they make us very proud, so I wanted to make that clear, and hello to everybody from their wider network. And also the Rediscover Centre, which you just heard is part of our network through the Irish member. Here are a few figures to illustrate the impact of the work of our members, who annually divert around 1 million tons of materials from landfill through their activities in reuse, repair, and recycling. And through these activities, they engage over 100,000 individuals through employment, training, volunteering. Reuse is based in Brussels, and this is where I am now. It's almost dark here. And we are based here because we are primarily an advocacy organization. We are working very closely with the European institutions and following their policy and legislative processes with the aim to influence it and make sure that the policy they are creating is supporting our sector, is supporting reuse, but also social enterprises working in this field. One of the many topics we work on is our reuse targets that Claire just mentioned, and I invite you, if you're interested in our policy work, to go on our website, because today I will not have the time to go into that. And secondly, because we are a network, we naturally accumulate a lot of interesting organizations with a lot of great projects. So my role is to facilitate an exchange of this knowledge among our members, make sure that they have opportunities to network and learn from each other and to help each other develop. And today I want to mention a few examples of innovative social and circular activities from our network. First of all, there are two examples tackling the behavioral change, which we have mentioned a few times today. And I would like to explain two campaigns that our members get involved in. The first one is Back to School. I think a lot of you know that around August and September, parents are very busy with finding school equipment and school items for their children, and this is also something what creates a lot of financial burden for many families. And a lot of our members have activities around this time to communicate that there are also secondhand alternatives to buying new. So they run many different activities, including collection of school bags to sell them in their secondhand shops. They promote specifically the school supplies in their shops or online shops. They make upcycled bags. They offer discounts for students and teachers. And also, of course, during COVID, the importance of having access to ICT equipment was really important. So many of our organizations somehow redistribute ICT equipment and work with schools and also sell secondhand equipment. The next campaign I want to mention is actually very timely. Maybe you are aware that tomorrow we'll be, in quotes, celebrating the Black Friday, which is a consumption feast that came also to Europe from the North America, and it really stimulates impulse shopping, and it offers a lot of discounts, which create complete madness in many places. And I think we can see increasingly that the environmental organizations are trying to oppose this and raise awareness on how damaging this day is. Many organizations are running campaign with the name Green Friday, which entail different things, and also a lot of our members have their own actions on that day, but I want to highlight this particular campaign, Green Friday, which originates from France. And it was created by social enterprises also from our network and other partners. It's supported by the City of Paris and the Agency for Ecological Transition and many, many more partners. The idea of this campaign is to, on the one hand, show people alternatives to consumption in reuse and repair, but also really show them that with their purchases they can make a difference, and they can change the world around them for better or for worse through the way they're shopping. So I also invite you to have a look at their website, and maybe you can follow them tomorrow and support their social media posts if you want. The second theme I want to talk about is collection for reuse. And we have some great examples again from the network. So this one is from Estonia. Our member Uskasutuskeskus have created some innovative collection points for reused goods. First, in the right top corner, you can see these collection points which are placed in shopping malls, so indoors, where people can drop off different items for reuse, like textiles, books, toys, sports equipment, etc. And the other ones which you can see there outdoors, these collection houses have been recently launched in 4 sites in Estonia, and they're placed in parking lots next to big shopping centers, and people can donate items there 24/7 through these little halls that you can see, the pink and the blue one. So again, smaller items for reuse. And also these houses are manned during weekends, so people can drop off bigger items. And this really tries to bring more people to donate stuff and connect it maybe with their weekly shopping and so on, and make it more convenient for them. The next example is using cargo bikes for different activities around reuse, including collection of donations for reuse and also delivery. So our Belgian members are using cargo bikes to reduce the car transport on short distances, so picking up donations, but also the customers can rent the bike to deliver their purchases home without using a car. And I will invite you here as well to have a look at our website, because we have a whole article where you will find many more projects related to bikes. And the last theme I want to talk about is circular skills and social enterprise. This is a repair truck which was created by our Spanish member Soljanza, and it's actually 2 tracks. One is for repairing electricals and one for repairing textiles. And this track is a mobile repair service for citizens where they can come and they can learn how to fix their objects thanks to the staff which is there for them, and also all the tools that are available for them. And this is an amazing service also socially, with also the potential to reach communities which are maybe not so central, or going to different events and raise awareness. And the last example is, oh no, sorry, I deleted the last example because I was afraid I will run out of time. But I also want to use the opportunity that there are many of the member of Circular Community Scotland, so part of our wider network, and I want to invite them to our event next week, which is exclusively for Reuse members, and it's an online interactive site visit to the Reuse Center of our Italian member. I will send you the link through the chat where you can register. And to everyone else who is not part of our network, and our members as well, of course, I very much encourage you to join our event mid-December with the European Commissioner for Environment, where we will be discussing the social value in the circular economy. And that's everything from me, and I'm happy to respond to any questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Jana, for those very relevant examples, and as you said, timely as well. So look forward to seeing you back for our Q&A a little bit later on. And I'd now like to introduce our next speaker in this session, and that's Susan Sheen, who is Business Development Manager for Instant Neighbour. Prior to joining Instant Neighbour, Susan was an established leader with a commercial focus for approximately 20 years. She thrives on inspiring others to achieve and exceed their own potential. And Susan also sits on the committee for Aberdeen Social Enterprise Network. Instant Neighbour are a member of the Circular Communities Scotland Reuse Consortium. So let's welcome Susan to the main stage to talk to us about good practice in Scottish procurement. Over to you, Susan.
Hello, thank you very much for that introduction, Heather. I'm delighted to be here today to talk to you about Instant Neighbour and the work that we do with the consortium. Instant Neighbour have been supporting people in Aberdeen for the last 36 years. We offer real help today and hope for tomorrow, and our main aim is to alleviate poverty in Aberdeen. We do this by supporting people who are on low incomes. We ask for donations of good quality reuse furniture, which we then sell in 3 locations. We have 2 physical shops and we have an online shop as well. It's not just furniture, it's white goods, clothing, bric-a-brac, anything that will help somebody to set up home. Volunteering opportunities or offering volunteering opportunities to people are really important to us. We do this through working with about 30 different organisations across the city, especially working with those who are perhaps furthest away from employment, helping to build confidence, self-esteem, and of course learning new skills. They can work in our shops, warehouses, vans, and in our offices. And our aim is to arm them with the correct skills so that they can go back into the workplace. We have 2 social enterprises. The first one is a carpet fitting service, so we can supply and fit new carpets. And we also have a joinery service. Our joiner can do small jobs, large jobs, anything from fitting cat flaps and doors to building kitchens. These are professional services that are affordable, and I should say at this point that anybody can shop in our shops and anybody can use any of the services that we have available. As well as the work that we do through the consortium, we also have another contract with Aberdeen City Council where we store the items that belong to people who have been evicted from their properties. So we store them in a safe environment where there is clean, and we redeliver them when they're rehomed. This is a free service to the clients, but the council pay us to do this job. From these income generators, through these generation schemes, the money goes back into the organisation, and to support the charitable work that we do. The first one is the Giving Tree. We've been supporting people for the last 31 years, families who can't afford to give their children gifts at Christmas time. We get names of children from criminal justice departments, community centres and social work departments, and as well as our own food bank clients. We have a number of supporters across the city who will display the tags with the children's names on them, and we encourage the public will purchase gifts, new gifts for these children. We will pick them up and then we'll re-deliver them in time for Christmas. And to give you an idea of the scale of this, the Giving Tree, last year we handed out over 13,500 gifts to children in the North East who ordinarily wouldn't receive any gifts. The second charitable piece of work that we do is our food bank. Sadly, there's still a huge need for food banks, and we are just one of 20 food banks in Aberdeen. Last year was a tough year for everybody with the pandemic, and from January to June last year, we handed out the same amount of food parcels that we did through the whole of 2019. Ending 2020 by handing out over 10,500 food parcels to 2,500 people. It's really important to us to understand the reasons why people come to our food bank. So for that reason, we employ somebody whose role is called, that we have called a community connector. And his role is to engage with people that come to the food bank, find out a bit about their situation, and then signpost them to experts for help. For everything we do, we rely on the public support. So we need them to donate the food to us to support the food bank, support them, purchase gifts for the Giving Tree, and also give us the donations so that we can sell them in our shops. So that's what we do at Instant Neighbour. But for the consortium, the Reuse Consortium is a national procurement contract with Scotland Excel, and that Circular Community Scotland helped to build a few years ago. This encourages local authorities to engage with organisations in their area to provide reuse items rather than new items for people moving into their properties. And Instant Neighbour delivers this contract with Aberdeen City. We provide furniture and white goods to people who are moving into their accommodation. Being part of the consortium has enabled us to work with the local authorities in a very different way. The fact that they are using reused furniture and electrical items is hugely important to everyone for the long term, given the environmental and climate discussions that are currently going on. Of course, the other benefit of being part of the consortium is that we are all in it together. Different local authorities will work in different ways, and the consortium members are there to support each other. For example, if we were asked to provide a bed for someone, but we don't have one in stock, then we know that we can always turn to one of the other members, and hopefully they will be able to provide it for us. Finally, through the reuse and the reuse of the furniture, the white goods, and through our shops and through the consortium, I just wanted to share with you that in 2019, Instant Neighbour diverted 165.3 tonnes of items from landfill. I give you 2019 figure because, of course, 2020 figure was slightly different. It was slightly less because we were open for less time. Its figure was we reused 80.7% tonnes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Susan, for that fantastic overview of the varied and very diverse work that Instant Neighbour is involved in. So I think we're now going to have all of our speakers back on main stage for, I've got time for one or two questions. If you have a question, please post it in the Q&A tab. And I think one has come through for Claire. around targets and data, and asking about local authorities and the role they play, and whether targets for local authorities on that sort of finer level with your data would be appropriate. What do you think?
Yeah, the waste management system works a bit differently here in Ireland. So most of waste collection is privatized, which means that the local authorities have a much lesser role in dealing with waste or reuse, and indeed have less, I suppose, incentive. There's no connection with rates and waste management. So local authorities themselves don't have targets around reuse. But having said that, where targets will be introduced, which is in the National Waste Plan, those plans are fed into by local authorities. So a little bit complicated, I guess, but I suppose essentially they're not responsible for setting or meeting targets.
Okay, well, so it's a really slight departure there, but certainly we do seem to be at the same place with a circular economy bill that you talked about. So there might be a question coming through for that. But Susan, how do you engage with local authorities and get them to buy into the Reuse Consortium programme? So can you give us share with us any top tips on how you've engaged with Aberdeen in particular around sort of buying into the philosophy?
Yeah, I think it's really finding the right person on the ground that's really interested in reuse. We in St Aoibre have had a long relation for a long lot of years, had a relationship with the local authority through the other contract that we have that I briefly spoke about. So we kind of had an in there. So I really think that it's having the right person. I think there's 7 local authorities at the moment that are part of the consortium, that are involved in the consortium, and I know that it has been a real struggle to get local authorities to engage. And I think the common thread between all the local authorities that are engaged is because there's someone in there that is interested and willing to take it on. It's also about communicating the value to them, as well as to the benefit that they will get by using reuse, because they will save money because they're spending less money, so they've got money to spend elsewhere.
Exactly, I think that's such a key point, isn't it? It's about saving money rather than spending money or additional cost. It's actually in the longer term, which isn't that long sometimes. It's about making savings. And Jana, I think one of the key themes that you picked up on that's been running through our conference is around the challenge with behavioural change. And some of the projects that you shared with us were good examples of success around that particular challenge. So just drilling down a little bit, what do you think really made a difference in these projects? What advice would you have to others in terms of how you manage to achieve behavioural change? Is there a particular sort of process that worked well?
Well, I think the campaigns and achieving a behavioral change, I think there is still quite a big gap. So, but I think that the stage where we are now, for example, with Black Friday, it's a good one where people are increasingly getting aware, and that's, I think, is the first step to doing something differently, because now they're already sensitized. I've opened social media today and there are so many Green Friday communications that I think it really gets even to a normal consumer, hopefully, at some point. But indeed, I think there is a lot of work to be done to reach those who are not converted. But I do think that also the topics like textiles and, textiles after plastics, it really, in a way, helps to sensitize even people who don't essentially care about the environment. But these images are just so horrific that you cannot not care maybe. And with Black Friday, I think in Europe, seeing these pictures of madness and people stepping one on another just to buy something, hopefully it will alert people and they will make that link. And I think our members also really help them to show that, and it's coming from local organizations who have very good link to citizens and a lot of trust. So hopefully the message will get through.
Yeah, I think there's progress, isn't there? But as you say, we still have a way to go as we see Black Friday loom and all the negativity around that. So, just a question around our circular economy bill, Claire. What advice would you have for us here in Scotland in terms of, what are the really important things that need to be in there for it to be a success?
Gosh, I guess certainly for our bill, it's looking at some of the kind of structural issues. So how do you put a strategy and a program on a statutory basis to make, and for us as well, the comments that we've made to our own circular economy bill have been around progress reporting, making sure that whatever is processed in terms of a circular economy strategy is actually followed up on, that we can see where things are and that we can take remedial actions if we're going off track. And that's the same for targets. So the other things that our bill is introducing are these targets for reuse, a food waste roadmap, and levies on disposable or single-use coffee cups and drinks containers, and potentially in the future levies on food containers as well, takeaway food containers. So that's just to say what's in our one. And I guess a lot of that is been a long time coming, and it's been backed up by research, particularly the targets. And I guess you do need that backing and the basis to help measure and track some of these things. So I think, if anything, it's very helpful to have that research to support legislative measures and statutory basis.
Absolutely, and I think data capture here in Scotland has come on bounds in the last few years as well, with many of our partner organisations playing an important part, and ourselves. But just a couple of quick questions to finish, because I'm keeping an eye on time here. A question has come through for Susan about engaging with local authorities in terms of increasing mattresses and carpets in reuse. I mean, is that? I mean, I think that's something that we've talked about in previous conferences. The role of carpets and mattresses in landfill. Do you see success in terms of reuse or dealing with that challenge?
Yeah, I mean, certainly through the consortium, beds are really popular. We through the consortium, we deliver a lot of beds. We don't do carpets through the consortium, but we do carpets with Instant Neighbour. I think it's because they have a contract somewhere else to get carpets, and it probably comes down to money. But yeah, I mean, because we're Revolve certified, we have certain criteria that we've got to go through. So we've got to ensure that everything is clean, everything has got fire safety labels, everything like that. So I think they're now confident. They have confidence in our ability to supply good, clean products. And I have to say, it all comes down to the donations that we get, which again, we thoroughly rely on the general public to do that. To give us the donations. So yeah, there's not a problem. The only challenge that there can be is a manufacturing point, where they will put fire safety labels on items of furniture that you can actually see. So you have to cut them off, and then they're no longer reuse because it's a legal requirement. You've got to have it on. So, but that's a different challenge.
Well, yeah, that's an important message, though, as well to get across, isn't it? I think I've been in that position in the past too, and it's very frustrating. Thank you for voicing that. And then just finally, Jana, I'm going to finish with a more of an international a standpoint here. And really just ask if briefly you feel COP26 helped in any way in terms of helping us with the whole sector in terms of reuse and in terms of circular economy. Do you think COP26, what's the feeling in the rest of Europe? Do you think there's been progress and it was a benefit?
Well, I must admit, as Reuse, we haven't been following the COP so closely because our work is not directly on the climate agenda and the climate policy purely, which of course Reuse is very much related, but we focus on the circular economy and waste part. However, I know that our members also here try to do some work to raise awareness on this topic and make consumption a part of it. I have the feeling that also from the environmental NGOs in Brussels, the feeling is rather frustration, but I don't really think that we have expected that the COP will, save us from anything. I think our work just goes on, and the thing that your network is working on are amazing. And I just wanted to say that Scotland is extremely inspiring. And today, when I heard your circular economy minister speaking, just the title is already huge. And also her speech and her attitude was incredibly inspiring. And it really makes you see what a difference it makes if on such a high political level you're really being recognized as a priority, and rightly so. And so I think we just have to keep working and keep being a confident sector. And I think sooner or later, hopefully, all the political leaders will recognize the importance of our sector. And I don't think COP was there to save us or save our work.
Well, certainly. Thank you very much for all your contributions today and all the very best with the amazing work that you are doing back in your own organisations and institutions. It's been inspiring listening to you tell us more about that work and the examples and case studies you've shared with us. I'm sure have been brilliant food for thought for all the delegates. So to Claire, to Jana, and to Susan, a big thank you from all of us for being here and for sharing all those presentations. Thank you very much indeed. And now that all that's left for me to do before I hand over for the conference closing remarks is can I draw your attention to a final poll that has just gone live in our polls tab, or it's just about to, I think. Where I think everybody could hopefully fill in that as we're going through just the final. There we go, excellent. As I speak, it's magic. A little bit of feedback for us because it really does help shape future events for our members if you can do that. I would like to thank all of our speakers today, all of you, our delegates, for bearing with us online, posting questions and interacting during the breakouts. I've learned so much once again. It's been a pleasure to be with you. I'd now like to hand over to Naomi Johnson, who is Chair of Circular Communities Scotland, who is going to close our conference for us today. Naomi.
Thank you. What a great conference, our first conference of Circular Communities Scotland. And thank you, Heather, for hosting and getting us through today's agenda so professionally and on time. I've really enjoyed today's conference. I think it's been brilliant to see the level of interest and engagement that everyone's had as our speakers have been on. And so I wanted to say a big thank you really to all the delegates for joining us at today's event. This community wouldn't be anything without you and without the work that you're doing and without the engagement that you have. I think it's a great moment just reflecting on that last session. You know, this is also our first conference with our own dedicated circular economy minister. What a great place Scotland is in, I think, hopefully to lead the way on this agenda. So In terms of kind of the speakers today, I'm not going to run through everything we've heard, but I think we've heard quite a lot in that policy environment. Particularly, I reflect on things around reuse targets. I reflect on the anti-consumption kind of flavour that's starting to come through, and really starting to hear things move up that waste hierarchy. And it's really encouraging to hear that, I think, particularly with so many of our members involved in that part of the agenda around reuse. I was delighted when Michael presented the impact report. As chair of this organisation, I'm always really proud of the work that the staff team have done. But I think also we see the real results of the work on the ground coming through in that impact report. And, we always say it, but we would be nothing without the members and without the hard work that everyone in Scotland is doing. I've been asked to kind of reflect a little bit on the polls, so I hope you've completed them. I'm also hoping I can actually see the results of them, because I just tried to look and I wasn't quite sure exactly how that bit worked. So this might be where I do a slight mess up. I'll do my best. No, I've gone over to the stage, but I can't see the results. So I'm going to have to tell you that because we did do a little check-in earlier before they're finally closed. I think, in essence, some of the feedback that we're getting is it is being seen positively to start looking at things like reuse targets, and I'm really encouraged by that. I think there's obviously some work we'll have to do as an organisation to make sure they work for our sector. I've been around in this environment for a long time, and I'm very aware that sometimes targets can suddenly drive bigger organisations, bigger companies to get involved in agendas, and that can be a threat to our sector as well. And I think we'll be bearing that in mind very much as we work around reuse targets moving forwards. I wanted to just say I think we know we've got lots of work to do around inputting on that circular economy bill moving forwards, and really pushing reuse and anti-consumption, tackling consumption up that, and looking at the hierarchy, not just in terms of recycling, and really working up that. So really looking forward to doing that work with the team and with you as members in the coming years. I want to do some formal thanks, if I may, and I'll try and do these quickly, but I'm also really aware that without doing these thank yous, we wouldn't have a conference. So they're really important. So thank you, Heather, for hosting us so well. For the team at Cameron, who've really kept the technology going. I think we'll all have been at conferences where the technology can be a challenge at times. And I know, having spoken with Elaine, she's really keen to thank particularly Adam and Paul, who've been working with her from the outset and have been providing support today. I hope you managed to visit the exhibition. It's always a challenge in the Digital Expo, I think, but we've tried to make that slightly different, and we hope that you've engaged with that. I'd like to thank all of our speakers today and our workshop hosts. So, it's not just about your time today. We know it takes time to prepare for these sessions, and we really appreciate your input. Our sponsors, you'll have seen them across the screen, I guess, all throughout the day. Zero Waste Scotland, Keegan and Pennykid, RMAS, Thriftify, Just Enterprise, Kudos Software, Social Enterprise Academy, Better World Books, the Verdancy Group, Repic and Social Enterprise Scotland. Again, without your sponsorship, doing the conference in this way wouldn't have been possible. So a big thank you for all of your support in today's event. Last but not least, to the team at Circular Community Scotland. It's always interesting to be. Elaine did provide me with a list so that I didn't miss anyone in terms of the thank yous. And she's asked me to thank Michael and all of the team, but she always is very humble when she puts these events together. She hasn't asked me to thank her, and I'm going to thank her particularly. We know this conference really comes together because of the hard work that Elaine does, working with the team. It's really a team effort at Circular Community Scotland, but Elaine really leads on this event, and I think she's done a great job today. So I hope I've not missed anyone in the thank yous. You're always under pressure not to miss anyone at this point. So just to think about our moving forwards, I think we hope you've liked the new brand that we've launched today. For me, this is more than just what it looks like. This is really setting out what we think is critical in terms of addressing some of our challenges around climate. We believe it really puts people and communities at that heart of tackling some of these challenges. And I think it's fair to say that as we move on from COP and whatever you think the outputs were, we all are here because we want to see see things translate into action. And I guess the big push that we will continue to do, and I know that you will continue to do, is to really push for both social and environmental justice. And I look forward to working with you all on that moving forwards. So thank you very much for joining us today, and we hope you've really enjoyed being with us. Have a great evening. Thank you.